Chapter 27-22. After 10 years. 10 years had passed since the gods' continent first appeared, and the once barren land had been completely transformed. The passageway that linked other realms to this continent had also been opened for the same length of time, and cultivators from each realm had made their way over in troves. The enlargement of the continent also made it possible for countless more cultivators to be there. At that time, Emperor-level cultivators had occupied the ruins where the Heavenly Path 8 legions had been previously and divided their respective territories using the ruins as the center. For example, the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture used the Naga ruins, 1, as the center point of their cultivation, while those from Devil World used the ruins of the Karura. Not only that, but the cultivators had also built imperial palaces within their respective regions. Many tall, imposing palaces stood on this ancient continent. In addition, when the strongest forces from every realm occupied any ruins, they also started to construct their bases, resulting in the once barren continent turning into a flourishing and vibrant area now. In particular, where the 8 legions were situated, one could see numerous city walls and moats. They were impressive in appearance and a stark contrast to how the place had been before. The cultivators who came to the gods' continent were all pioneers, just that. This time around, the pioneers were all powerful cultivators from every realm, and they could transform this piece of land in the fastest time possible. The cultivators in the land were also undergoing continual transformations. It was not rare to see clouds of tribulation rolling above the skies in recent years. Previously, it was extremely rare to see cultivators passing through tribulations, but on this continent, it happened frequently. Some passed the first tribulation, others the second, but no one gave the third. The divine tribulations came in threes, and passing all 3 would make one a god on the emperor level. Yet even with all the changes taking place in the world today, it was still difficult to pass all 3. Of course, with cultivators from every realm training together on the same land, fights over the relics would still occur, and there would be clashes. Especially when cultivators from different realms clashed, a chain reaction would often occur, causing massive disturbances. Fights and battles were happening all the time on this ancient continent. Conflicts of all kinds were never-ending, and some ended up victorious while others were thoroughly defeated. The survival of the fittest was constantly showcased. In addition, even till now, there were still highly mysterious relics on this land that had yet had their mysteries cracked, attracting many cultivators to head there to probe. Alas, many extremely powerful cultivators ended up dying in those relics. The especially dangerous relics were even termed Forbidden Zone of the Gods by the cultivators of the land. No one knew what events had occurred before in those forbidden areas, but it was inevitable that there had to be beings on the Emperor level there in other forms. Otherwise, there was no reason they would be so dangerous as to cause many top-level cultivators to lose their lives there. Yi Imperial Palace, which was previously the ruins of the Maharaja, had evolved into an impressive palace complex. Meanwhile, cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace came over continuously to train in this palace complex that encircled mountains, and many also went outside to explore. What's more, Yi Futian and company had also opened another linkway that linked to Ziwei Segmentum, allowing those from Ziwei Segmentum to come to this land to cultivate also. However, as they were not part of Ziwei Imperial Palace, they were not allowed to use the cultivation resources from Yi Imperial Palace. Yi Futian only allowed them to visit the ancient continent like other cultivators from the other realms. As for how far they could progress or how they would turn out, Yi Futian was not responsible for that. It was up to that person's destiny. At the summit of Yi Imperial Palace, which was at the top of the sky stairwell at the edge of the palace complex, there was a will of the solemn. If you stood on the sky stairwell and lifted your head to look, you would involuntarily feel awed as if it was an actual imperial palace. The divine sword and sword formation hidden within the sky also gave people a sense of pressure, looking majestic and divine. Following the steps of the sky stairwell to the top, one would find the magnificent and imposing imperial palace there, while behind the palace, there was a massive training ground. In there sat a white-haired cultivator. Around his body, a jade-green divine light spun round and round. His whole figure shone brightly and seemed as if the light and physical body were adjoined as one. The surrounding earthly will seemed to have been affected by him and fluctuated according to the divine light's movements. Just by sitting there motionless, it felt as if he was the ruler of the world. Futian opened his eyes at that moment, and a jade-green divine light glinted and penetrated the vast area. He looked up above the skies. He was still unable to get past this stage. It seemed as if he had encountered a bottleneck. He felt that the current him had cultivated until the highest level of a certain plane, and was now at the doorstep of the demigod level. Yet, he was unable to take the step into the door. Perhaps he still lacked understanding. Besides, Futian knew that his journey of cultivation had been different from the others in some ways. Ever since he had achieved the pinnacle in the Renhuang plane, he had started to walk along a different path. How the third and final tribulation would be, he did not either. His current cultivation level was still at the pinnacle in the Renhuang place. It differed from the powerful cultivators who had passed through tribulations, yet he had also passed through two. How can I take the step in? Futian murmured to himself. He was able to be at the doorstep of the demigod level with the powers of the divine ruler, and was also able to spar with near deities. He vaguely felt that, if he were able to take that step, he would be able to be at the pinnacle of the demigod level. Once there, save those at the emperor level, there probably would not be anyone left who could compete against him anymore. Probably only Ji Wudao, Dongwang Diyuan, and those others at the demigod level, or those comparable to the great Skylords Black and White Almighty, would qualify to go up against him. He stood up and turned his head, only to see Hua Jiu sitting against the wall, cultivating. A large beam of divine light surrounded her, and it was as if that place had become something special. Her aura was also out of the ordinary. There was a divine stone floating in front of Hua Jiu. It was among the 100 overstones that Futian had gotten, and it was one of the more special ones. Due to its uniqueness, a lot of time was spent activating this stone. On seeing Hu Jiu engrossed in her cultivation, Futian decided not to disturb her but turned around. With a move of his will, his body vanished from where he had been and appeared again outside the heavenly palace. Futian looked down at the lower skies. Divine consciousness enveloped the entire palace complex, and the activities of the cultivators all appeared in his sight. These days, he practiced alchemy, activated the divine stones to aid other cultivators in learning divine techniques, was cleansed by the dragon's blood, and let others bathe in the dragon's blood. This was paired with an elixir, and they would perform closed-door cultivation afterward. It did not matter. Whether they were from Ziwei Imperial Palace, West Imperial Palace, or the Lost Clan, all the cultivators underwent a complete transformation. The important people in Ziwei Imperial Palace improved especially quickly. In recent years, that had been quite a few that had passed through tribulations and became powerful cultivators. Just then, there was a flash at the sky stairwell below. It was old Ma. He moved toward Futian and bowed. Your Highness. Although they once had a close relationship, in the current Ziwei Imperial Palace, everyone highly respected Futian. Despite being a junior, he had done so much for everyone that no one took his age into account anymore. You don't have to stand on ceremony, Uncle Ma, Futian replied. Old Ma was still the protector of Ziwei Imperial Palace. How are things like in the outside world? Futian asked. Ever since the chaos that had taken place then, he had not gone outside to court any more trouble after he had obtained the divine stones. They had already gotten plenty and were not greedy. What's more, the best inheritances had all been snatched up by those at the emperor level, and there was no way he would incite a fight against them. It's a changing situation. Every day is different, Old Ma answered. But the divine relics on the gods' continent have been more or less completely plundered. They have either been taken control of or inherited, except a few secret places known as the Forbidden Zone of the gods. As they likely contain extraordinary inheritances, many people desire to decipher them. Ah, I see. Futian nodded and looked toward the distance. After not being able to get past the cultivation bottleneck these few years, perhaps it was time to go out and have a look around. One, also known as Naga relics. Chapter 27-23, Turning into a Demon. "I'm going outside to have a look," Yi Futian remarked to Old Ma. Old Ma nodded, and Yi Futian's figure disappeared immediately from the sky stairwell. Old Ma looked toward where Yi Futian had disappeared and was overcome with emotion. He still remembered the day Yi Futian first came into the village. At that time, he was just a genius junior. Now, however, he had become one of the top cultivators globally and was the leader of an extremely strong force. Aside from those at the emperor level, there was likely no one that could compete with him any longer. Even those of the ancient god clan were powerless against him now. Moreover, Yi Futian's demeanor had undergone a complete transformation. It was completely different from his past. He could just about visualize the current Yi Futian becoming an emperor. He already had the airs of one. 7. Comment. Yi Futian reappeared on the outskirts of the palace complex. The former ruins of the Maharaja had now been transformed into Yi Imperial Palace, and the outskirts were also the property of Ziwei Imperial Palace. Many cultivators had arrived here from Ziwei Segmentum and constructed many buildings, which made the area look like an outer city when viewed from afar. This was probably also the current portrayal of the entire God's continent. Here was only tiny corner. Yi Futian disappeared again in a flash. He traversed in the high skies, gazing down upon the land. The many constructions in sight showed that this ancient continent was no longer barren. He looked up at the upper skies. His sharp eyes pierced through the boundless space, beyond the clouds, and into the outer regions. He could see that the void had been filled with the essence originating from this old continent, and continents were floating in the midst. Yi Futian knew what that meant. Following the expansion of the God's continent, the divine light had also been spreading out to cover the other continents in the original realm. As such, those continents that were part of the original realm had become the outer sections of the God's continent. This was also the case for Ziwei Segmentum, and the former 3,000 realms of the Great Path. In the future, the original realm would likely become similar in structure to the Divine Prefecture, having countless continents all within the same dimension, with the God's continent as its hub. The Divine Prefecture was also an amalgamation of many continents, but unlike the original realm, it did not have a continent like the God's continent as its hub. Yi Futian quickly passed through the skies above the God's continent, and switched from looking at the upper skies to the land below. "You behave sneakily despite being a Buddhist cultivator and are a disgrace to Buddhism." Just then, Yi Futian spat out words that shook the void. His voice rang out throughout the boundless space, causing tremors within the void. Below, numerous cultivators lifted their heads to see a white-haired figure. "It's Yi Futian!" Somebody recognized him. Even those who had never met him in person had all heard of him. With such a special aura, outstanding appearance, and an iconic head of long silver hair, the figure above could only be Yi Futian. Who was he talking to? Who were the Buddhist cultivators? At the top of the skies was a golden Buddhist light, and in the distance, a pair of frightening eyes appeared within the void. They pierced through the void, looking toward Yi Futian. The cultivators below could see nothing of the newcomer but those eyes. It made their hearts race. That was an unnerving pair of eyes. Did they belong to Shinyan Buddha Lord? But had his eyes not been stabbed and blinded by Yi Futian when he had trespassed into the ruins of the Maharaja? Yi Futian sensed the other party and frowned. It seemed like Shinyan Buddha Lord had made tremendous progress, turning misfortune into a blessing after being stabbed blind. His eyes had become even more astonishing and powerful. Just then, those eyes in the void released a terrifying golden light that pierced directly through the void like a razor-sharp blade and headed for Yi Futian. Yi Futian turned and disappeared from the area. Two beams of divine light cut through where he had been standing before, causing a hole to appear, but Yi Futian was somewhere else. Buzz! Many eyes lit up simultaneously and headed toward Yi Futian. All at once, 10 million beams of golden divine light pierced through the void and moved to attack Yi Futian. The area was flooded with innumerable divine lights. Oh my! The cultivators were unnerved as they witnessed this scene. They had not thought that just an eye spell alone could be that terrifying. Those beams of divine light coming out from the eyes were enough to kill even the strongest cultivators. Futian kept vanishing from the spot, but the eye's spell lights seemed to be bent on sealing up the void. They came at Futian furiously, and a gigantic divine eye appeared above him at once. It resembled the eyes of Tiantian, and the cultivators below were all taken aback when they saw it. "Hurry up and leave!" Futian shouted to the cultivators, and it was only then that they reacted and fled the area in a hurry. Just as Futian finished speaking, the eyes in the skies again released countless beams of divine light that covered the sky. They were akin to sharp blades and headed straight for Futian. At the same time, Xinyan Buddha Lord's figure also appeared in the upper skies, revealing himself. He now possessed a strong aura, and his powers had become more stable than when he had first passed through the second tribulation. He had sought medicine Buddha Lord for help with his injured eyes. Although they did not fully recover, the divine eye technique he had been practicing developed further. It replaced his physical eyes, and he became much more powerful, and now, he did not need his physical eyes anymore as his divine eyes were everywhere. Futian saw the deadly lights coming at him but did not dodge this time. A Buddhist light blazed around him, and he transformed into an indestructible golden body. A jade-green divine light encircled the golden body, blending with it in harmony. Bang! 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 Horrifying attacks continued raining down. The divine lights coming out from the divine eye were like razor-sharp blades that could cut through anything. They struck the golden body, creating loud noises in the process. A crack appeared on the body, but it remained in one piece, shielding Futian's body. However, some people below were not as lucky. Although the battle had taken place in the high skies and were far from the ground, the divine light was so terrifying that it pierced straight through the void and into the lower skies. Those hit by the light immediately disintegrated into pieces, leaving not a single bone behind. They did not even have time to cry out. Futian lowered his head and looked below, and then looked toward Xinyan Buddha Lord again. A golden dazzling light encircled his body, and he coldly stated, "Buddha Lord indeed? Lance cultivated at Western Heaven and could be considered a semi-disciple of Buddha. I will eradicate this Buddhist scum on behalf of the other Buddhists today," Futian said aloud, his voice shaking the void. As he finished speaking, two beams of divine light that contained the will of the great Emperor shot out of Xinyan Buddha Lord's eyes and onto Futian's golden body. In an instant, the golden body broke into pieces, but Futian also vanished at the same time. The two beams of divine light continued to strike and raze everything within the area to the ground. Yet more people died, and those who were fortunate to escape were terrified. They used their divine wills to look into the battle in the high skies as they fled, and they felt their hearts go cold. Xinyan Buddha Lord was already a demigod and incredibly powerful. He also seemed to have the help of imperial arms. Would Futian be able to cope? The cultivators were hoping Futian would be the victor and get rid of Xinyan Buddha Lord. This Buddha Lord had no qualms about taking innocent lives in his bid to kill Futian, and had incurred the wrath and enmity of the people. Futian reappeared at another place and looked at Xinyan Buddha Lord. When he had been stabbed blind, even the Buddha of Destiny had urged him to let go of his obsession. Yet it seemed that his obsession had only grown deeper, and he was now too bent on having his revenge for letting go. There is only a thin line between being a Buddha and being a demon, and Xinyan Buddha Lord had turned into a half-demon. His eyes were still blind, but a pair of divine eyes had replaced them. They were intimidating, and in there was a Buddhist divine sword. It was an imperial arm taken away by Xinyan Buddha Lord when he invaded the ruins of the Maharaja. The jade-green divine light glowed, and divine light kept gushing out of Futian. They converged in front of Futian and wrapped his entire body in them. Futian morphed into a silhouette of a god. He held the divine ruler in his hands and looked up at Xinyan Buddha Lord in the void. Judging by his expression, it was obvious he meant business. Chapter 27-24. Yes of the War God. Xinyan Buddha Lord looked down upon Futian's silhouette. The eyes above the skies glared with murderous intent. A divine light glowed, and divine eyes began to envelop the area. The area subsequently converted into a domain, and within the domain appeared countless Buddhas that saturated the entire domain. The light of Buddha emerged from between the Buddhas, bearing down on the cultivators below. The cultivators looking up at the domain all felt the need to bow down on the ground and convey their reverence. Yi Futian, today I will let you see what a real Buddhist technique is, Shinyen Buddha Lord exclaimed, and his voice shook the void. He lowered his eyes, and at once, the light of Buddha emerged simultaneously from the bodies of the Buddhas. Inside the domain, Buddhist divine swords shot out from the countless Buddha's pupils. They shuttled across the void, undeterred by the spatial distance. They destroyed everything in their path. The eyes were like swords that penetrated heaven and the earth with the Emperor's will. Buzz! Yi Futian's figure flickered and disappeared from where he was standing. The divine swords also vanished instantaneously. They were quick as could be and were not deterred at all by the spatial distance. This was a Buddhist sword method, the sword of Kasyapa. The sword resembled a beam of light. And its prowess was unparalleled. It seemed that Yi Futian had vanished into thin air to the watching crowd, but in actuality, he was using teletransportation to move about. However, the divine eyes above the skies was also one of the Buddha's 6 superpowers like teletransportation and could track Yi Futian's every movement. The swords formed a matrix that could lock everything under surveillance, working together with the Buddhist divine sword technique. The cultivators below saw the skies turn into a domain of swords of light that engulfed the entire area such that no matter where you moved, you were in danger of being stabbed by the swords with the potential to die. Just then, from a certain corner, a light shone brightly from the divine ruler, and a jade-green divine light came sweeping out. The cultivators looked over to that corner, and were surprised to see Yi Futian appearing in the high skies. He was heading straight for Shinyen Buddha Lord, undeterred by the onslaught of the Buddhist divine swords. The divine ruler headed straight up into the skies, and Yi Futian appeared to have fused with the divine ruler. A divine light surrounded him as he aimed straight at Shinyen Buddha Lord. The heaven-slaying divine sword was contained within the divine ruler, and numerous divine swords materialized to take on the swords of Kasyapa. Humph! Shinyen Buddha Lord let out a snort, exerting his dominance. The Buddhist divine swords continued their assault, and were met by the heaven-slaying divine swords. The swords clashed, and a brilliant divine light lit up in the skies. A resultant storm came sweeping out and turned everything it touched into dust, including the wills of the swords. The jade-green divine light was repelled, and Yi Futian returned to his original form. The divine ruler in his hands remained the same, and was still battling the imperial arm. It was shocking that it did not break. Shinyen Buddha Lord stared at Yi Futian below, and was equally shocked. The divine ruler that Yi Futian had obtained from the ruins of the Karura was indeed an extraordinary divine object. It remained sturdy despite going up against the Buddhist divine swords. He also felt that this divine ruler was no ordinary divine arm, one, if it could withstand the hits from both the Buddhist divine swords and the sword of Kasyapa without breaking apart. Yi Futian likely could sense the current level of Shinyen Buddha Lord's prowess after that hit. As a demigod, he was undoubtedly remarkably strong, but if it were just this, Yi Futian would have no problems finishing him off using the divine ruler. However, the addition of the imperial arm made killing him much harder. One wondered just how oppressive the combat power of a demigod with an imperial arm would be. "You fake Buddhist disciple, today will be the day you die." The divine eyes above the skies were still staring down at Yi Futian, and Shinyen Buddha Lord's words resonated within the void. The divine swords beneath the divine eyes let out a brilliant glow that inundated the entire area, encapsulating the domain within. His previous attacks had all just been to sound Yi Futian out. Even though he hated Yi Futian to the core, he also knew that Yi Futian was mighty. He had waited a long time for Yi Futian to emerge and was not letting this chance to kill him go. Yi Futian had to die today. Yi Futian looked up toward the high skies and stretched out his palms. At once, a jade-green divine light emanated from his body and rushed straight to the clouds, engulfing all parts of the sky in its glow. "What's this?" The cultivators stared at the place where Yi Futian was at. The jade-green divine light had obscured the skies and was glowing intensely. The divine ruler was also continually expanding and had now grown into a giant ruler that touched the sky. It appeared that Futian had only been using the tip of the iceberg of the divine ruler's powers up till then, and was now releasing it in full. Futian's expression was solemn, and his entire being was shrouded in divine light, as if he had assimilated into the force of the great path and become one with it. Many people could sense his prowess, and were stunned that he was still on the Renhuang Plain. Futian's Renhuang Plain was completely different from the others. His level was created purely by Mother Nature. With the coming together of the great paths of heaven and earth and their fusion, he became the path itself. The divine ruler was not an imperial arm but was created through the heavenly rule. After it had suppressed the demonic lord, it had been swallowed by Futian's life spirit and incorporated into his life spirit. The amount of power that Futian had used was indeed only a small portion of the divine ruler's power. Now, however, he was facing a demigod who possessed an imperial arm. His current level would not be good enough to defeat Xinyan Buddha Lord. Alongside the glow from the divine ruler, it encompassed the entire vast region and became Futian's domain of the great path. This here was his path. Above his head, the jade-green divine light emanating from the divine ruler whirled around frantically and turned into an enormous vortex. It obscured the skies and also Futian in the upper skies. The disk vortex devoured every bit of its surroundings, even the force of the path and the worldly spiritual chi. Only that humongous divine ruler could stand firmly within the spinning disk. Is that a divine matrix? The cultivators below were blown away as they witnessed the dazzling scene above. It was formidable and daunting. Futian raised his hand to summon the divine ruler and the disk. A menacing devouring power and divine light were springing out from within them. Above the skies, the Buddhist divine swords broke through the void and tore it into pieces along with the sword of the Kasyapa that was released by the divine arms. They sliced everything in their bid to get to Futian, but upon reaching him, they were shockingly devoured right away into the vortex above. Futian. Within the vortex, there seemed to be unlimited space that made everything devoured by it vanish without a trace. What kind of divine technique is this? The cultivators were astonished. The divine swords had all been devoured into nothingness. It rejected nothing, and as long as the divine matrix was present, nothing could overcome the vortex. This technique had been learned by Futian when he activated one of the divine stones and incorporated his powers into it. The word nothingness was inscribed on the stone, and it had contained an extremely formidable divine technique. After Futian had finished his cultivation, he could comprehend and master it thoroughly. He then used the divine ruler's powers to enhance it, resulting in what everybody was looking at now. A horrific murderous storm appeared above the skies, and the swords of the Kasyapa attacked savagely. However, they were swallowed up. Then, Futian raised his hands toward the void and pushed the air forward. The storm immediately moved toward the upper skies and devoured the attacking power of the sword techniques. Nothing could escape it. The divine eyes stared at the lower skies below. He was surprised that the divine ruler could be so powerful. His divine sword's attack power was tremendously strong, and even they got devoured up, unable to break the storm apart. This meant that their attacking power was not yet good enough. The divine eye showed its true form. The Buddhas in the domain started reciting the sound of Buddha together, and the light of Buddha swamped the heavens. The halo of Mahavairakana appeared behind the Buddhas and fused into the divine swords. At once, the halo of Mahavairakana appeared above the Buddhist divine swords, ready to bomb everything in the world. Kill! Xinyan Buddha Lord commanded. Immediately, the Buddhist divine swords started raining down. With the halo of Mahavairakana above, it looked like the sun was falling down. The scene of the sun falling together with the divine swords was terrifying, to say the least. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion was heard, and the divine swords dove into the vortex. The halo of Mahavairakana burst, and the vortex started to implode. The divine lights of destruction flooded the dome of the sky, but the enormous divine ruler and the divine swords clashed together with a loud bang, as if the heavens and earth had shattered. If here was not the gods' continent but any other place in the original realm, it was likely that the whole area would be smashed into pieces already. Even so, the divine lights of destruction still shrouded the entire area, causing even the heavens to light up. This time, Futian did not retreat. The divine ruler met the Buddhist divine swords head-on. It did not seem to be losing out in the slightest, and even forced the Buddhist divine swords back into the high skies, while it continued standing where it was. What power! Though this divine ruler isn't an imperial arm, it isn't in any way inferior to them and is a supremely divine item. It's even more valuable than the imperial arms, just that its powers have yet to be fully discovered. Someone in the lower skies uttered in admiration. The divine ruler was able to suppress the demonic lord after all. Of course it isn't some ordinary thing. But how much of the divine ruler's power would Futian actually be able to unleash? As they were speaking, Futian's body was magnifying until it became the same size as the divine ruler. He had transformed into an unrivaled god. Chapter 27-25, Heavy Attack. As Futian's figure expanded, that emerald-green divine light soared upward and shrouded the sky. The divine light sheltered the sky and covered this entire area. Futian's body was now hundreds of feet tall, which complemented the massive size of the divine ruler. Like a god descending into the world, he appeared invincible. The divine light circled him and turned into stars. When the stars began to move, they revolved around his body and formed an absolute defense. This was the ability of Ziwei the Great. In the past, Futian had been using this defensive ability very effectively. Now Futian had nearly transformed into the path itself. When the emerald-green divine light shrouded this area, those flowing stars seemed to be one with him, turning into an absolute defense. Xian Buddha Lord fixed his eyes at the area below, but he seemed less confident now. His realm was indeed higher than Futian's, and he was already in the realm of near deity. He had already comprehended the power of the great path that belonged only to him, which was one of a kind. Those whose cultivation was below this realm were simply no comparison, as they would be destroyed and immolated. However, Futian seemed to be an exception. His realm was far inferior to his, yet the will of the great path formed by that green divine light integrated so perfectly with Futian that it was almost as powerful as his near-deity realm. Above the sky, an unparalleled divine light bloomed out of the divine eyes. The divine sword that held his hand suddenly chimed loudly as countless phantoms of the divine sword manifested. This Buddhist divine sword seemed to transcend all kinds of powers. Xian Buddha Lord was not an expert in swordsmanship, but the imperial arms he obtained were a Buddhist divine sword, so it was natural for him to launch an attack with this to unleash its most potent power. If he had tried to kill Futian by using other Buddhist methods without the might of the imperial arms, it would be pretty impossible, as he was no competition to Futian in swordsmanship. He thought that aided by the imperial arms and with his realm, even if the two didn't fit with him so well, it was more than enough to kill Futian. However, he could have never expected it to be such a difficult task. Futian was far more powerful than he had imagined, especially the power of that divine ruler, which was second to none. His divine eyes could not detect any weaknesses. Kill! Under the divine eyes in the sky, the divine sword slashed down again, ignoring the distance and space, and arrived instantly. Every strike seemed to hit the weakest point in the starry defense. This was the true power of the divine eyes. Bang, bang, bang. The violent sounds continued to be heard, enough to shatter heaven and earth. Cracks began to appear on the starry defense light screen. As each new crack appeared, another sword strike struck, not wasting the slightest chance to expand these cracks as rapidly as possible. It seemed that any subtle changes could not escape the scrutiny of the divine eyes. Buzz! Just as the cracks continued to expand, Futian moved. The towering godlike figure held the divine ruler in hand and attacked the sky above. Suddenly, the phantom of a gigantic divine sword manifested from the divine ruler. The divine sword slew the heavens as the exalted ruler turned into swordsmanship. The sword that could slay the heavens could slay everything. Terrifying sounds of rumble came out, and the starry defense collapsed and pulverized. The heaven-slaying divine sword sailed through the void, aiming directly at Shinyen Buddha Lord, who was above the firmament. The attack covered the boundless space, and a more terrifying collision than before erupted. The heaven-slaying divine sword and Shinyen Buddha Lord's imperial arms slammed into each other, and the firmament shuddered violently. Countless sword wills surged madly in the direction of Shinyen Buddha Lord. Shinyen Buddha Lord opened his divine eyes and captured the trace of every sword. A massive Buddha appeared behind him with countless arms that blasted terrifying gigantic handprints into the area below. At the same time, that unparalleled power continued to shatter the shadows that surrounded Shinyen Buddha Lord. The two of them climbed higher and higher into the firmament. Futian stared at the other like a god as the sound of Buddha continued to pour out of his mouth. Suddenly, many Buddhas filled the sky above, and their bodies lit up with the extremely radiant light of Buddha. The ancient words of mantra appeared on the bodies of the Buddhas as they raised their hands simultaneously, blasting at Shinyen Buddha Lord, who was above. It was the All-Heaven Buddha's seal. The expression on Shinyen Buddha Lord's face changed suddenly. In like manner, images of Buddhas also appeared around him, with the sound of Buddha lingering and resounding throughout the void. Suddenly, giant handprints of Buddhism slammed out to collide with the All-Heaven Buddha's seal. Above the firmament, an unparalleled ancient Buddha manifested. His presence covered the entire sky above as if it was the Lord of all Buddhas. Countless green divine lights flowed into the Buddha, and in the next moment, a boundless and massive Buddha's seal overwhelmed heaven and the earth. It struck at Shinyen Buddha Lord so that Shinyen Buddha Lord was pinned between two powerful attacks with nowhere to turn. Buzz! At this moment, a kasaya flew out from the body of Shinyen Buddha Lord. The kasaya expanded madly until it covered the sky and sheltered the sun. The kasaya surrounded him as countless light of Buddha lit up above it, like ancient Buddhist seals. Thousands of runes floated in front of him, flying around the body of Shinyen Buddha Lord as if they were some precious Buddhist treasures. Shinyen Buddha Lord recited the sound of Buddha, which resonated with the kasaya. Immediately, the supreme Buddhist runes upon the kasaya turned into a divine seal and flew out, colliding with the gigantic handprint that blasted down from the sky. Futian watched everything calmly. For Shinyen Buddha Lord to become one of the Buddha Lords in the Western world of Buddhism, his strength was unquestionable. However, as long as he could restrict the power from his opponent's imperial arms, the outcome of this battle was quite predictable. In the past few years, Futian had not been idle. Golden runes continued to fly out of his mouth as they were branded onto the heaven-slaying divine sword. The green divine light surrounded the divine sword with a horrific might. Futian raised his hand and pointed at the divine sword. Suddenly, the divine sword continued forward, colliding with the imperial arms wielded by the other man as if burning up the last bit of power from the heaven-slaying divine sword. At the same time, Futian's body disappeared from where he was and reappeared next to Shinyen Buddha Lord and moved up along with him. The green divine light dazzled as that massive and gigantic divine ruler converged in front of him. Shinyen, at the moment, was not looking so great. The divine ruler was not an imperial arms, but a power that ruled the great path, which could be used in different places. Currently, Futian seemed to have integrated with the power of the divine ruler perfectly. Boom, boom, boom. A terrifying sound was heard. Above the sky, massive and boundless divine rulers flew over, and every divine ruler seemed to contain supreme power, the power of the rules from the heavenly path. Shinyen Buddha Lord sensed something was amiss. He wanted to strike with the divine sword but found that the power of the heaven-slaying divine sword was still there, suppressing his imperial arms with the last bit of its strength. Shinyen, today, I will send you to the afterlife on behalf of the Buddhist sect. As soon as Futian finished speaking, an unparalleled power suddenly exploded. Many unstoppable divine rulers came down on top of Shinyen Buddha Lord. Every divine ruler contained the power of absolute suppression as if to suppress everything in this world. Shinyen Buddha Lord let out a roar as he was attacked front and back. He was stretched to his absolute limit. Boom, boom, boom. Humongous divine rulers rained down one after another, suppressing even those brilliant runes on the Buddhist Kasaya. Shinyen Buddha Lord let out a muffled groan as his face paled. Some divine rulers had breached his defense, shattering the Buddha phantoms that had surrounded him. Bang! With a loud bang, a divine ruler smacked right on the body of Shinyen Buddha Lord. As a mouthful of blood came out of him, he was white as a sheet. He clasped both hands as the boundless light of Buddha bloomed so that the divine ruler was unable to penetrate his body or break through the physical defenses of his body. He incarnated as a golden Buddha, immortal and indestructible. Bang! 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 The divine rulers slammed down repeatedly so that the runes on the golden body began to crack. Until finally, the golden body itself was split open, and blood came pouring out of his mouth. "It's time for you to get on your way," Futian said as he moved forward, carrying the divine ruler with him. The divine ruler brought the utmost supreme divine light to smash through all defenses, as it blasted on Shinyen Buddha Lord. Then, like a sharp sword, it penetrated through his body, which ran through the golden form. This sight was somewhat similar to when the divine ruler was used to suppress the demonic lord. The golden body was now completely pulverized, and Shinyen Buddha Lord turned back to his own physical form. He looked down at the divine ruler that had gone into his body, and there was a look of shock and fear in his eyes. Could he be killed just like this? Today, he came here to slay Futian. After waiting for such a long time, the day finally came when Futian was out of the ruins so he could be killed. However, Shinyen wondered, did his action end up burying himself instead? "Get on your way." Futian repeated what he said before. The divine light upon the divine ruler erupted, and the golden body shattered instantly. Shinyen Buddha Lord's body exploded into tiny pieces, which then turned to dust, disappeared entirely without a trace. Shinyen Buddha Lord had fallen. Everyone who was watching the battle above the sky was in total shock. Although a great distance separated them, the battle was far too brilliant to be ignored. They all saw with their own eyes how Shinyen Buddha Lord was killed, and their hearts were beating wildly. Futian had slain the Shinyen Buddha Lord. How brutal was this kind of strength? A near-deity existence with imperial arms was killed by Futian just like this. One could only imagine the impact this had on the other cultivators. Futian retracted his aura and glanced at that Buddhist divine sword. Then, he looked into the distance and said, "Chien had demons in his heart, and acted aggressively. He had tried to take my life several times before and left me no choice but to kill him. This sword belongs to Buddhism and ought to be returned to its rightful owner." With a wave of his hand, the divine sword instantly flew into the distance. In that direction, a Buddhist divine light lit up like a beacon, putting away the Buddhist divine sword. Obviously, Buddhist cultivators were there. Before, when he was battling with Shinyen Buddha Lord, there were cultivators from the Buddhist sect who were observing the battle. However, they didn't show themselves but merely let the two fight. Clearly, the Buddhist sect was also of the opinion that this was a personal grievance between the two. "Amitba." A voice was heard but didn't say much more than that. Futian bowed slightly and replied, "I will take my leave now." Immediately after that, Futian disappeared and left this place. Watching his disappearing figure, the people below were left in turmoil for a very long time. Chapter 27-26 Forbidden Zone of the Gods. Futian, the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace, had not been seen in public for several years. It was said that the cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace had built a city on top of the ruins of the Maharaja. Because of all the cultivation resources that Futian had obtained before, they concentrated on cultivation ever since. It had been quite a few years since Futian made his presence known in the involvement of a glorious battle. He had immolated a cultivator in the near-deity realm, the Shinyen Buddha Lord, from the Western world of Buddhism, who was aided by imperial arms that were at his disposal. Although Shinyen Buddha Lord had not been in the near-deity realm for too long, and the imperial arms he had were not as compatible with his abilities, there was no doubt that the combat effectiveness exploded by such combination ought to be considered frightening. Futian did not win by trickery. However, He killed Xingyan Buddha Lord fair and square by engaging him head-on. This number one genius talent from the original realm was still one of the most dazzling characters in this era of significant changes. He was no less than the heirs of those imperial-level forces. The news spread out, but it didn't cause much fanfare. It was not because the battle was not brilliant enough, but because more people focused on their cultivation. The gods' continent had not quite settled down after the significant changes that took place, and its cultivational environment was different from that of the other realms. Any major events that happened in any realm would instantly spread to the rest of the continents, but here, none of the cultivators spent much time noticing anyone else. More importantly, on the gods' continent of today, some shocking happenstances would occur from time to time. When Futian walked upon this continent, he visited many places. When he came upon a canyon, he saw that there were many people above the canyon who were cultivating there. They had even built clusters of buildings, and many people were coming every day to cultivate here. At this time, Futian had also arrived in this place. As he walked, he found himself among an endless stream of cultivators coming and going, but most were heading in the same direction. Futian was heading there as well. He came to a cliff where many cultivators were standing on it. Even the boulders upon the cliff were occupied by various cultivators. He stood on the edge of the cliff as his eyes surveyed the canyon below. He saw that the environment below seemed very picturesque, with flowing springs and green shades provided by trees. An intense spiritual atmosphere pervaded from below, as if it was a place of cultivation for the immortals. However, this was the forbidden zone of the gods on the gods' continent. According to legend, there was the presence of the gods in the small world in the canyon. However, most cultivators would only dare to walk around on the periphery. For those who had gone in, no one had returned, hence the name of the forbidden zone. Who knows who would obtain the divine treasures in this forbidden zone? Someone commented. Nowadays, there are fewer and fewer gods' relics on the gods' continent, and many are already taken. The remaining forbidden zones are hard to come by, and the chances are getting slimmer by the day. The cultivators next to him commented. Although they were here, most people did not dare to go in. All they dared to do was stand outside and watch. Heard that a mysterious cultivator appeared on the continent and took over a lot of the ruins. He was ruthless, and his strength was mighty powerful. He was able to directly swallow the inheritance of the ruins, and many top figures had fallen into his hands. Heard that as well. This person's cultivation has reached the top, and the ones he targeted were also from the top principalities of all the worlds. This demonstrated just how powerful his strength is. Who knows if he isn't some old monster who had been alive for many years? Everyone was talking about it, and all of them had their own opinions on the matter. The appearance of this god's continent was the talk of all the worlds back then. The changes that occurred were why all the worlds had opened up their passages to come here. Everyone imagined that they would profit from these changes between heaven and earth, thus ushering in some transformations. However, today, 10 years later, they found that everything was but a dream. They didn't get anything, and everything they had imagined was just an illusion. On the other hand, the gap between them and those top figures became a great chasm. The strong would only get stronger. The changes between heaven and earth had created a group of genius talents who were destined to dominate this world, but they were not part of it. Of course, they may feel a sense of loss, but the changes were beneficial to them in reality. This continent now traversed the land of the original realm, and was ideal for cultivation. Many people may not even plan to go back to where they were. This place may become the center of all the worlds. Dong Wang Diyuan has been inside for a few days now. Who knows if she can get to the divine treasure or not? At this time, another person piped up, and what he said surprised Futian. Dong Wang Diyuan had gone inside the forbidden zone of the gods. Dong Wang Diyuan is indeed the daughter of Dong Wang the Great. With such a noble status as hers, she dared to enter the forbidden zone of the gods by herself. Few men can match this kind of courage. She is daring because of her incredible ability. But it is true that Dong Wang Diyuan's noble status does set her aside from all the others. As a princess, there was no need for her to undertake such a great risk. After all, she has plenty of relics at her disposal. Even if the Naga relics were not so suitable for Dong Wang Diyuan's cultivation, she had obtained the power of the ancestral dragon nonetheless. The people next to him chatted amongst themselves, which surprised Yi Futian a little. Not only did Dong Wang Diyuan enter into God's relic, but she did so alone. However, he had been cultivating on his own for all these years to reach the realm he was today. Conceivably, Dong Wang Diyuan must have also continued progressing with her cultivation. Today, with her strength and various resources, she must have already climbed to the top of the cultivation world. Even in Dongwang Imperial Palace, there were probably not many who could stand shoulder to shoulder with her. Indeed, she was powerful enough to no longer need anyone to protect her. Perhaps Dongwang Diyuan thinks that this forbidden zone is possible for her to break into. After all, besides her, there was another group of people who had ventured into it as well. In the past few years, they must have gotten some information about the forbidden zone. Someone continued. Knowing Dong Wang Diyuan, she probably wouldn't act recklessly without having some idea that she would prevail. Even if it was the forbidden zone of the gods, everyone still believed that Dong Wang Diyuan could emerge victorious, having the opportunity to inherit the divine treasure. After all, Dong Wang Diyuan's talent, strength, and background made her the most likely candidate to succeed. At this moment, everyone saw another figure walking towards the canyon, heading directly into the depths of the canyon. All of a sudden, everyone's attention focused there with great interest. Someone else wanted to trespass into the forbidden zone? Who was this man? Yi Futian. Someone recognized him and watched the white-haired man heading towards the area below. Yi Futian is here as well. The hearts of many palpitated. Yi Futian's reputation nowadays was known throughout the gods' continent. Even if these people had never seen him before, there was almost no one who had never heard of Yi Futian's name. It was said that years ago, in the battle at the Old Heaven Court, Yi Futian shocked the world with his performance, as he led the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace to face off with the cultivators from the Heaven Realm. Not only did he not yield, but he got on the sky stairwell under his power and snatched the energy from the statues of the gods, defeating the Supreme Heavenly King, the head of the 4 Heavenly Kings. In this generation, Yi Futian's name was more than qualified to be put next to Ji Wudao, Dong Wang Diyuan, and others. Under the gazes of everyone, Yi Futian came to the bottom of the canyon. The environment was excellent. A river flowed through the rocks, and ancient trees on both sides were also lush and thriving. In front of him, there was a small pathway. Inside, Yi Futian could faintly perceive a mysterious atmosphere. There was a tributary of the river next to the path. As he proceeded further, the rocks on both sides became more significant. When he went further inside, Yi Futian found that the boulders which formed the mountain cliff seemed to be of one entirety. Yi Futian pointed his finger at the cliff, but nothing happened, not even a trace had appeared. Just as I thought, Yi Futian marveled. If this boulder could be split open, perhaps those top figures had already done so from the outside to get to this relic. None of them were able to do it. If someone like him could not even leave a trace on this cliff, then it was a testament to just how impenetrable this cliff was. Perhaps only the gods of ancient times could have accomplished something like this. Is this the cave residence for a deity? Yi Futian wondered to himself as he continued to walk along the path. Gradually, the path was cut off by the river and could only be continued through the waterway. Yi Futian did not want to get through by supernatural means. This was the cultivation place of a deity, and he dared not to be too disrespectful. A small boat formed in front of him, and Yi Futian stepped onto the boat, moving along with the river. As he continued to venture deep within, he could feel that mysterious atmosphere was intensifying. He looked up at the mountain wall on top and the 2 sides around him and felt an invisible force permeated all around him. Although it was not strong, he could feel a faint resistance. There was some kind of a light in front of him, as if somewhere deep inside, someone could sense anyone who ventured into this place. Finally, Yi Futian saw an arched doorway blocked off by a curtain of a waterfall. Yi Futian's small boat passed through the archway and the curtain of a waterfall. Futian felt as if he had passed through the gate of time and space, and suddenly, he had entered into another space and time. Everything suddenly opened up. When Futian saw the landscape before him, he knew that he had come to a small world. This forbidden zone of the gods was a deity's small world of cultivation. Futian looked behind him and saw the archway had disappeared. There was no way out. He frowned slightly and took a deep breath. No wonder this place was known as the Forbidden Zone of the Gods. Concentrating and refocusing his thoughts, Futian looked at this small world and found it was quite beautiful, like a place where immortals hermits cultivated. He was probably correct in assuming that this was a cultivation place for deities. A mysterious atmosphere permeated the entire small world, which could not be fully construed. He looked at the road ahead, and could vaguely make out several dead bodies. As he moved forward, Futian walked to a corpse and saw the corpse was well preserved. There was a terrifying aura of the great path on the body, something like a fighting will. This was, in fact, not the dead man's aura but the aura of what killed him. This cultivator may have been killed by a will, so his body was not damaged, as he was obliterated without a fight. Futian heightened his alertness as he surrounded himself with wisps of great path aura, preparing to continue forward. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt an aura of extreme danger. Buzz! He disappeared immediately from the spot, using the Buddha's celerity. A most powerful will descended instantly, ignoring his evasive movements and locked onto him. The Buddha's celerity seemed to have lost its effect. Futian continued to evade and dodge with Buddha's celerity. At the same time, the divine light of the great path flowed upon his body, protecting him, and a strong will erupted. Bang! A loud boom was heard, and Futian felt a terrifying will rushed into his body regardless of everything he was trying to do. His body fell from the void as he was blasted to the ground. His spiritual soul was shaken, and he was in a semi-unconscious state as if he was on the verge of blacking out. What happened? A thought appeared in Futian's mind as the aura of the great path shrouded him. In an instant, a terrifying will descended. Instantly Futian retracted the will of the great path upon him, and the will dissipated immediately. Nothing appeared, nor were there any more attacks. Futian's heart was beating wildly as he remained lying on the ground, staring at the sky above the ruins in a daze. That horrid will was coming from above as if it had integrated into this small world. TT can track auras. A voice sounded in Futian's head. If he had reacted any slower just now, the second attack would have fallen right on top of him. This small world did not allow the existence of other auras. As soon as any other wills of the great path were detected, it would attract powerful attacks. Fortunately, he realized it just in time. Or else, he would have been bombarded to death by this will. Was this how those other cultivators died? Probably some people hadn't even had time to react before they were killed. They didn't even know what came over them. With his cultivation realm and willpower, a single blow that could render him powerless like this was enough to demonstrate how terrifying the attack was. If another cultivator in the second tribulation plane were hit by this blow, he would lose half of his life even if he managed to survive. It was more likely for someone to be killed by a blow like that. More importantly, some people couldn't react at all after being attacked the first time, so even if they didn't die from the first blow, they would instinctively release the power of the great path to resist. Then, what awaited them would be the second round of attack. Forbidden Zone! Futian lay there and didn't get up. He had been taught a lesson as soon as he came in. It seemed that the Forbidden Zone of the gods was not so easy to get through. Here, the existence of other great paths was forbidden. Any other auras would be immolated summarily. The will of the great path flowed inside Futian's body and did not disperse outside of him. He was repairing his own injury, and after a while, he finally stood up and looked in front of him. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. After taking another deep breath, Futian walked forward without any fluctuation in the aura of his great path. The crisis that occurred moments ago made him realize that all other paths from the outside were forbidden in this small world. Were the heavenly gods so aggressive and unforgiving? Futian walked forward, and he was doing so very slowly. He did not dare to be careless, and he was in no hurry. As he moved forward, he found that the scenery in this small world was stunning, refined, and peaceful, and it was an excellent place for cultivation in solitude. With no one to disturb, this was a most suitable place to cultivate in retreat. Moreover, as Futian kept moving forward, he did not encounter other dangers. His journey had been very smooth. It seemed that as long as he did not release the aura of the Great Path, there would be no danger for him. Futian's pace quickened as he continued forward in this small world. Along the way, there were more corpses. If these people were able to make it this far, it was possible that they may have seen the mystery of this space. Their deaths, most likely, were the results of them trying to seize the items they found in this small world. As battles between cultivators ensued, things might have gotten out of hand. There are many things in here that were unusual and contained a wisp of the will of the great emperor, filled with extraordinary auras. Futian had sensed it when he was moving forward, but he did not try to take any of them. Right now, everything was unknown, so he had to be highly cautious. He wanted to see what secrets were held in this small world. More bodies. At this moment, the will in front of him was getting more robust, and there were more and more bodies strewn about on the ground. So much so that Futian had to slow down again. He could sense the danger all around him. Someone's there. Futian looked at a place and saw an old man who looked extremely dirty behind a giant boulder, who had retracted his aura. He remained motionless like a non-presence. If Futian hadn't seen the man, he would not have even sensed his presence. As if he had detected Futian's presence, the old man opened his eyes, and a cold light came through those eyes as he said via voice transmission, "Leave." Futian didn't quite understand. He frowned as he looked at the old man and responded by voice transmission as well. "Sir, what was up ahead?" This old man was deliberately using voice transmission to communicate with him. It seemed that he was trying to avoid something. "Go away." The old man seemed a little exasperated as he stared at Futian with eyes that seemed to want to swallow him. Futian frowned, still puzzled by his reaction. Then, a strong sense of danger descended upon them. His eyes sharpened as he looked ahead and saw that a highly terrifying aura was approaching them. In an instant, Futian became a little nervous, and his expression was extremely grave. In this small world, he realized, auras could not be released. Otherwise, the attack from the will of the great emperor would descend and slay anyone who released the atmosphere. However, why was there such a powerful aura ahead of them? The old man hiding there also felt it, and he didn't look pleased. He got up quickly and moved away at an incredible speed, trying to flee here as soon as possible. He did not release his aura, but the method he employed was still excellent. Buzz! An afterimage chased after him rapidly. It was a figure in white. Futian didn't even have a chance to discern what that white shadow was before he heard a violent booming sound coming from ahead of him. Bang! With a loud sound, the white afterimage collided with the old man. Immediately, the old man's body was knocked into flying, slamming into the stone wall next to him. A massive amount of blood was coming out of his mouth. And that white afterimage stopped and came into Futian's field of vision. The ancients? Futian's eyes sharpened. This was a woman clad in nothing but white, and she was immaculate. She had a fantastic will upon her, the same as the will that was attacking him before. This woman's visage was beautiful beyond words, as if it was perfectly carved. She did not appear to belong to the human world but an immortal goddess who walked out of a painting. Although her eyes seemed to be that of a normal person, they seemed to be missing something, like a spark of life. From her, Futian could not feel any signs of life. The living dead. Futian's eyes sharpened at this realization. Obviously, the woman who appeared in front of him was an ancient who belonged in this small world, not someone who entered it. The woman in white glanced at Futian, then looked away, turning her attention back to the old man. Her body turned into a phantom and disappeared directly. The old man cursed angrily. He turned his body into many afterimages. Spatial divine light circulated as he attempted to escape with the light. His method was exceptional. However, the woman in white also tuned into a phantom. By the time Futian looked over on that side, he could see that many afterimages had populated the space. A powerful aura of the great path erupted from the old man as if he could no longer afford to care much about anything. But the moment his aura was released outwardly, a terrifying will surged between heaven and earth, blasting upon him directly from nowhere. At the same time, the woman in white was already in front of him, and her two hands slammed into the body of the old man. Bang! The old man's body gave a violent shudder. This terrifying will directly impacted his spiritual soul, shattering it instantly into pieces. His lifeless body fell from the sky. He was already a corpse by then. Futian witnessed all this and saw how the old man was killed, feeling a little guilty inside. He may not have been the one who attracted the woman. It seemed that she was already chasing after the old man. But still, it had something to do with him being on the scene. Of course, this kind of guilt was nothing more than a passing thought. After all, his situation at the moment was not much better. The woman in white slowly turned around, and those dead eyes fell on Futian. An invisible will fluctuated, covering this entire space as if it had also locked onto Futian. This woman was a member of the living dead, so her eyes could not possibly see anyone or anything, since she was not living. Perhaps her actions were just the result of instinctual perception. Buzz! The woman in white turned into an afterimage once again and disappeared. That terrifying will came at Futian, and it was a mighty fighting will. Futian tensed up. With a thought, he disappeared right from where he was. Boom! A terrifying blow slammed somewhere in the void, and the space shuddered violently, but it failed to make contact with Futian as he appeared somewhere else. This was the advantage of the Buddha's celerity. He could move at will with a single turning of his mind without resorting to the power of the Great Path, so it could not be locked down by the terrifying will that pervaded this world. Not a heavenly god! Futian sensed that the woman in white was likely not a heavenly god when she was alive. If she had been one of the ancient deities, she would be much stronger than this, and he would have no chance of escaping her attacks. Even so, the woman in white seemed to be transformed by the fighting will itself. Futian didn't have time to think too much about it, as the next wave of attack was upon him again. His figure flickered and was gone in an instant, disappearing from this space and reappearing someplace very distant. However, Futian discovered, to his dismay, that he did not throw off his opponent or her attacks. The terrifying fighting will become a divine battle seal and blasted at him. He moved and flickered continuously, but the attacks were not deterred by the spatial distance between them, as if it would not cease until it had eliminated its target. Futian knew that he couldn't evade it, so he gathered all the power within him to one of his arms. Suddenly the arm became brilliant, glowing with the divine light inside. Then, it blasted forward at the divine battle seal. Boom! This terrifying attack flattened everything. At the moment of the attack, Futian used Buddha's celerity to change his position. Even then, a terrifying fighting will still swept over him, which caused him to groan. His face paled as all of his internal organs were trembling from the impact of the aftershock, and his spiritual soul was shaking. Although she was not a deity, the fighting will contained in the attacks was the will left by the heavenly gods. Unlike the will, they had inherited or comprehended the world outside. This opponent, for example, seemed to be a manifestation of this supreme will. That's why the attacks were so overpowering, enough to hurt him with just a single blow, even when he had evaded using Buddha's celerity. If he had sustained the full impact of this blow, he would be in much worse shape. Futian retracted his aura and continued to evade the woman using Buddha's celerity. Eventually, the woman in white lost track of him. Clearly, just by sensing his existence with her will had its own limitations. After all, she was not an actual cultivator but just a zombie. Otherwise, he would really be dead meat in here. However, there seemed to be no danger in this small world other than the woman. Futian wondered what kind of existence that woman in white was. He changed his position and continued moving forward without seeing any signs of other cultivators. With his previous experience, Futian knew very well that anyone who had entered here was either killed, or if they were still alive, they would keep an extremely low profile to keep themselves hidden. Ultimately, no other cultivators had the ability of Buddha's celerity. If they encountered the woman in white, chances were that they would die in her hands. Futian's divine consciousness expanded in the hopes of finding some other cultivator to inquire about the situation at hand. However, he dared not spread his divine consciousness too widely, fearing that the woman in white would perceive it somehow. Huh! At this moment, Futian had a strange look on his face. He looked ahead and saw that there was a stone forest next to a river. The stone forest was very expansive, and inside, Futian sensed a familiar presence. In the stone forest, a woman was sitting cross-legged. At this moment, her beautiful eyes suddenly opened, and she raised one eyebrow. Coldness flashed across her eyes. This woman was wonderful, clad in a phoenix robe, trailing behind her on the ground. Her long black hair fell behind her freely. She raised her head slightly and saw the figure in white that appeared on a boulder in the stone forest. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. Do you know that it is extremely dangerous to release divine consciousness in this place? The woman's voice was cold as she stared at Futian, walking towards her. Futian didn't answer but kept looking at her instead, so much so that the woman's brows knit tightly together. A sharp look came out of those beautiful eyes of hers. However, she kept her aura of the Great Path under control as not to let it seep outside. Clearly, she was well aware of the rules that governed this small world. Is Princess Dongwang injured? Futian asked. The woman in front of him was none other than Dongwang Diyuan, who ventured into this forbidden zone of the gods by herself. She seemed to be in hiding here, to recover from her wounds. Perhaps she had a previous encounter with that woman in white. Dongwang Diyuan made no response, so Futian continued. Princess Dongwang has been in this forbidden zone of the gods for a while. Do you know what place is this, and what is the deal with that woman in white? He did not know if Dongwang Diyuan had any information. Do I know you? Dongwang Diyuan replied. Futian gave Dongwang Diyuan a look then smiled. Indeed, we don't know each other well. But on the other hand, we have a long history of grievances. As he was speaking, he jumped in front of Dongwang Diyuan, and there was a look of mischief in his eyes. This princess of the divine prefecture was truly cold and arrogant to the core. So, do you want to settle our old scores here? Dongwang Diyuan raised her head and looked at Futian, who was in front of her. There was not the slightest sign of panic as she asked, Do you think you can? Futian stared at her in disbelief when he heard those fighting words from Dongwang Diyuan. Was she trying to pick a fight with him? Futian walked towards Dongwang Diyuan with a sense of playfulness in his eyes. He said half-jokingly, We won't know whether I can or not until we try it, right? Dongwang Diyuan didn't look pleased as she regarded him coldly. She stood up with the most extraordinary manner, with her phoenix robe fluttered behind her with unparalleled elegance. If we start a fight here, both of us will surely die, Dongwang Diyuan said as she looked at him intently. If the two of them were to battle, they would release enough of their powers of the Great Path, which would then attract the Great Emperor's will in this world to attack them. If that happened, neither one of them could escape it. Why would I be willingly moving against a precious beauty such as Princess Dongwang? Futian walked forward, getting closer and closer to Dongwang Diyuan. Dongwang Diyuan focused on him as a force began circulating within her body. Soon after, Futian raised his hand to grab directly at her, but it was only using his physical power without resorting to the power of the Great Path. Futian knew very well that under the rules of this world, releasing the power of the Great Path was equivalent to seeking his death. Dongwang Diyuan raised her hand, and a terrifying force surged from her palm, but she, too, was controlling the aura of the Great Path to avoid it from leaking out. The hands of the two collided, which resulted in a violent boom. This shock caused cracks to appear on the giant boulders that surrounded the stone forest. What terrifying prowess! Yi Futian thought as he stared at Dong Wang Diyuan. He had experienced the physical prowess of Dong Wang Diyuan when they battled at the Devil Imperial Palace. She had inherited from the Divine Phoenix, and had been bathed by the blood of the Divine Phoenix, thus inheriting its power. Later, in the ruins of the Naga, she received the power of the ancestral dragon. When her hand slammed out, although there was no explosion from the great path, a faint chime of the dragon could be heard. It was an extremely dominant attack. Of course, Yi Futian's physical body was equally tyrannical, quite comparable with that of Dong Wang Diyuan. Yi Futian's hands kept moving, and whenever he pulled back one hand, another punch was dealt out. Dong Wang Diyuan may be a woman, but she did not shy away from colliding with him head-on. Again and again, the violent boom stirred up a great commotion within this stone forest. Although no aura leaked out, every strike made contact and formed a terrifying aura around the area, as dust and rocks were flying. Yi Futian sped up his attacks. The blood in his body was roiling, as if the aura of the great path roared inside, struggling to break through the limit of his physical body. In the eyes of Dong Wang Diyuan, there seemed to be the burning shadows of the ancestral dragon and the divine phoenix. They were also desperately trying to suppress the power of the great path from erupting. Accompanied by the strikes exchanged between the two, an invisible storm formed around them. Yi Futian's white clothing fluttered as Dong Wang Diyuan's phoenix robe, and long hair danced in the wind. Even if there was no powerful explosion of the great paths, the scope of this storm was expanding continuously as they battled. Bang! A great explosion was heard, and the two figures separated. The surrounding stone forest had been turned into dust, and everything was destroyed. The two stood opposite one another, the blood inside their bodies tumbled and roiled. Dong Wang Diyuan's face appeared quite rosy. It looked like it had been dipped in blood. The princess's face is so gorgeous and alluring, it is really quite fascinating, Yi Futian commented as he looked at Dong Wang Diyuan. He was being sincere. Dong Wang Diyuan was a rare beauty of the world, and an icy beauty at that, cold, beautiful, and extremely dignified. At the moment, her face was colored with a lovely blush, quite unlike how she appeared in the past. Her current state was utterly captivating. Of course, he was not bold enough to have any serious thoughts about her. Their grievances aside, Dong Wang Diyuan's position and strength alone were not something he was taking lightly. However, having been insulted by Dong Wang Diyuan and horsing around with her was not something to which he was averse. Dong Wang Diyuan stared at Yi Futian as if she could eat him. No one had ever spoken so disrespectfully to her like this insolent B** starred in front of her. Who was she? The only princess in all of Divine Prefecture, the daughter of Dong Wang the Great. Never mind joking with her. Normally, who would be so bold as to stare at her unscrupulously like this? But today, Yi Futian's eyes were scrutinizing her heedlessly. Boom! An even stronger aura exploded from Dong Wang Diyuan, and her face became even redder. In her body, the power of the dragon was gradually awakening, and the blood of the divine phoenix was roaring. It was a mighty powerful combination. Even if no aura of the Great Path had been released, Yi Futian could feel a fantastic momentum. The peerless beauty in front of him was more like a war beast in human form, pouncing upon him fiercely. Yi Futian was not afraid at all, however. He stepped forward without hesitation, and a violent sound was heard from the ground. The physical body he had created was extremely terrifying, and he was not afraid of anyone, even if the opponent he was facing was Dong Wang Diyuan. The two slammed into each other again, without fancy frills, and every strike made contact and collided at increasing speed. In the end, only countless shadows of fists could be seen intersecting and colliding. Accompanied by the violent confrontations between the two, horrific noises were heard in the surrounding space, caused by the commotions they stirred up. At the same time, the blood inside their bodies was also boiling and howling, bearing extremely horrific pressure. However, either one of them intended to stop. Or rather, either of them could stop at this juncture, so they did not bother to try. If you have problems with this website, Please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. Yi Futian felt his arms were bearing a great deal of force as if they were burning up. The force rushed inside his body and wreaked havoc amongst his internal organs, maybe trying to smash them. However, Yi Futian's ability to regenerate was remarkable as the life source inside his life palace extended into his 4 limbs and penetrated his skeleton. As soon as he was injured, his body began to self-repair immediately, and this cycle was repeated over and over again. Therefore, Yi Futian's aura was long and sustained, continuing without end. Not only did his offensives not weaken as time went by, but they were also getting more intense. Dong Wangdiyuan's face was getting ruddier as if blood could drip from her cheeks. Similarly, the blood and breath inside of her were also tumbling and roaring without ceasing. Although she was like a war beast in human form with domineering combat effectiveness, her ability to regenerate was not as superior as Yi Futian's. The continuous head-on collisions had taken a lot out of her, and she was beginning to feel that her arms were getting sore and weak as time went on. In addition, she had been injured already before their confrontations. However, even though her body was burning up, she had no intention of stopping. She continued her mad collisions with Yi Futian. Under such violent confrontations, blood began oozing from the corners of Dong Wangdiyuan's mouth. She had not yet fully recovered from her previous injuries, and now her face was turning from red to pale. Her beauty was now mixed in with a little desperation, and it was hard for her opponent to deal her any more forceful blows. Bang! Another explosion was heard as Yi Futian repelled Dong Wangdiyuan further back. He stood there with the breath in his body roaring and tumbling. He took a deep breath to steady himself, but his eyes never drifted from Dong Wangdiyuan. Likewise, Dong Wangdiyuan stared back at him. She raised her hand to wipe away the blood from the corners of her mouth. That cold arrogance, however, did not diminish in the slightest. "Princess Dong Wang, can you continue?" Yi Futian asked as he looked at Dong Wangdiyuan, using her words on her. As he was speaking, he continued moving forward, getting closer to Dong Wangdiyuan. "If you take one step further, I will release the aura of the Great Path, and you and I will both die," Dong Wangdiyuan threatened as she looked at Yi Futian intently. Yi Futian stopped in his track. He looked at her and asked, "What is this place? What is here? Who is that woman in white? Can't you tell it's the small world of the great emperor in ancient times?" Dong Wangdiyuan said coldly. "This small world is full of the great emperor's will. That woman in white may not have been an ancient great emperor, but her identity must be a little special. I guess she might be a descendant of the great emperor who perished in the battle of the gods. Perhaps the great emperor was reluctant to let her go completely and sealed this small world here with his immortal will. The woman was thus reborn along with this will and turned into an immortal existence. Maybe one day, she could develop a consciousness again because of this will." She didn't hide anything. The two fought against each other, and no matter what happened to her before, she had been defeated in the end. In this case, she must face her defeat honorably. Does the princess know which ancient great emperor it was? If that woman was born out of the great emperor's will, does this mean she has been nurtured by the great emperor's will in this sealed small world until she can become self-aware? Yi Futian asked. This was all a setup by an ancient great emperor to enable the woman in white to be reborn. "I don't know about that." Dong Wangdiyuan shook her head. "In ancient times, it was the era of the emperors, and there were many great emperors. However, there is not much information left after the Battle of the Gods, and there are no records in this small world about anything. But what is certain is that the woman in white is very close to becoming self-aware. As far as I know, she had been in a deep slumber before we came here to disturb her. Still, every day, she continues to sleep for some time to absorb the will of this small world. So, can we move while she is sleeping to find the secrets of how to crack open this world?" Yi Futian asked. "There are no secrets." Dong Wangdiyuan glanced at Yi Futian with some contempt. "This is a sealed forbidden zone of the gods. If Princess Dong Wang was to encounter a life or death situation, I am sure Dongwang the Great would come here to intervene in person, said Yi Futian. What was the forbidden zone of gods to someone like Dongwang the Great? Dongwang the Great was a god himself in the world they knew. If his only daughter were to encounter a life-or-death situation, how could he possibly not intervene? This was also why Yi Futian could never attack Dongwang Diyuan without reservation. He did not dare overstep his boundary. Just as they were speaking, Yi Futian frowned, and his expression changed drastically. Oh! He turned around and focused intently on a direction in the distance, and saw a figure in white appear. Like a ghost, it floated in the air without sound and approached with an invisible will locked onto both Yi Futian and Dongwang Diyuan. Dongwang Diyuan glanced at Yi Futian and thought that if it weren't for their previous battle, perhaps they would not have attracted the other party's attention. Buzz! The woman's figure disappeared immediately, and terrifying fighting will swept over Yi Futian like a tsunami. The woman who seemed to have walked out of a painting had erupted a horrific aura upon her. Yi Futian's figure disappeared from the spot in an instant, and the terrifying fighting will turned into a boundless and domineering fist or aura. At the same time, despite the distance between them, that fighting will was upon Yi Futian again, blasting him. As before, Yi Futian's only choice was to confront the onslaught head-on and used Buddha's celerity to evade at the moment of collision. With a loud boom, Yi Futian's figure had already disappeared from this space and reappeared somewhere very far away. His breath was unsteady. Yi Futian glanced into the distance. He could escape the opponent's attack with Buddha's celerity, but what would happen to Dongwang Diyuan? The injury that she sustained before must result from being attacked by the woman in white. At this time, the woman in white saw that Yi Futian had disappeared, so she floated towards Dongwang Diyuan's position again. A terrifying fighting will now shrouded Dongwang Diyuan's whole. Buzz! Another phantom appeared, approaching with incredible speed. That terrifying attack smashed directly at Dongwang Diyuan, but she avoided it by turning slightly to the side with exceptional precision. She evaded that blow, but that violent fighting will still swept over her. All she could do was to raise her arms and blast out an attack of her own. Bang! A violent crash came down, and Dongwang Diyuan's body flew back. The monstrous fighting will rushed into her body, impacting her internal organs. Blood came out of the corners of her mouth, as she had not yet recovered from her previous injuries. Even in her desperate state, she used the momentum of that force to retreat like a flash of lightning. Her movement was supremely intricate, and her speed was fast. However, if she wanted to move even faster, she would need to release the aura of the Great Path, and there was no way for her to do the same as Yi Futian. She could not move in space at will without releasing the aura of the Great Path, as he did with Buddha's celerity. However, in that instant, she seemed to have predicted the opponent's next move and avoided the frontal attack with precision and accuracy. Otherwise, it would have been much worse than that. The woman in white approached her like a ghost, raising her slender hands once again, slamming them towards Dongwang Diyuan. Dongwang Diyuan dodged again, but this time, the range of her opponent's attack covered the entire domain, and the great handprint of God shrouded the entire void. Just as Dongwang Diyuan had said before, this woman of the living dead was very close to becoming self-aware, and she was learning at a rapid rate. Bang! Another horrific loud noise was heard. This time, Dongwang Diyuan was attacked in the front, and her body was knocked back again. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her face became ashen. She stared at the woman in white in front of her with those beautiful eyes of hers. There was no panic or fear on her face, but just that icy arrogance. Roar! A loud boom came out, but it was the dragons chiming, and it was earth-shattering. As the great path erupted, a terrifying aura surged upward from Dongwang Diyuan. It was no longer held back but was ultimately released. The ancestral dragon and the divine phoenix appeared, guarding her flanks. Inside of Dongwang Diyuan, the soul of the ancestral dragon seemed to have awakened. A boundless and massive sacred ancestral dragon shrouded her body, releasing an unparalleled aura. It was the aura of a demon god. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. The ancestral dragon was the Lord of Naga, the most powerful demon god of the dragon clan, and was considered one of the most powerful demon monarchs in ancient times. One could only imagine how terrifying this aura was from such a terrifying existence. The will that erupted was the will of the ancestral dragon. At this moment, a suffocating coercion came down from the sky above, blasting down on Dongwang Diyuan. But that ancestral dragon roared up into the sky unyieldingly, fighting against that terrifying will. The entire small world seemed to light up as an unparalleled monstrous will moved towards Dongwang Diyuan below. This was the will of the gods. In this world, no other powers of the Great Path were permitted. When Futian felt this terrifying will, he looked up into the sky. He knew that Dongwang Diyuan had released her power, but facing the woman in white, she might not be able to escape if she did not release her power. Rather than just using her physical strength to fight, it might be better to wager everything for a shot. On the battlefield, a terrifying storm overwhelmed heaven and earth as the will of the small world descended, suppressing the will of the ancestral dragon directly. It was not that the ancestral dragon was not as mighty as the great emperor who ruled this world, but Dongwang Diyuan had merely inherited the will of the ancestral dragon. The great emperor left the will of this space in this world to deal specifically with outsiders. Boom! A horrific will pressed down as Dongwang Diyuan continued to fall. It seemed as if she was on the verge of being overpowered. Even so, her eyes were fixed in front of her as the massive wings of the divine phoenix spread out behind her. Terrifying divine flames flowed across the void, zooming in on the woman in white for the kill. The woman in white faced Dongwang Diyuan, and her empty eyes reflected the reverse image of Dongwang Diyuan. She slowly extended one hand, and suddenly, the fighting will between heaven and earth gathered into her palm, and a terrifying long spear emerged. Her body turned into a streamer of light and charged towards Dongwang Diyuan. Whether it was the person or the spear, both seemed to be transformed by the god of war's will and morphed into one. The dragon god's sharp claws smashed down and collided with the spear dealt by the god of war. The space trembled violently, but the spear penetrated the dragon god's sharp claws, pulverizing them. Instantly it slammed into Dongwang Diyuan and her defense of the Great Path. With a loud bang, the defense collapsed and shattered. Dongwang Diyuan's body was repelled back as the will of terror fell upon her as well. Her body flew out in a flash of light directly from the sky. She landed hard on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The terrifying will continued incessantly, slaughtering madly and indiscriminately. Even the shadow of the dragon upon Dongwang Diyuan was about to collapse. If the power of that will were allowed to keep attacking in this small world, Dongwang Diyuan would, no doubt, perish here. I don't know about that. Dongwang Diyuan shook her head. In ancient times, it was the era of the emperors, and there were many great emperors. However, there is not much information left after the Battle of the Gods, and there are no records in this small world about anything. But what is certain is that the woman in white is very close to becoming self-aware. As far as I know, she had been in a deep slumber before we came here to disturb her. Still, every day, she continues to sleep for some time to absorb the will of this small world. So, can we move while she is sleeping to find the secrets of how to crack open this world? Futian asked. There are no secrets. Dongwang Diyuan glanced at Futian with some contempt. This is a sealed forbidden zone of the gods. If Princess Dongwang was to encounter a life or death situation, I am sure Dongwang the Great would come here to intervene in person, said Futian. What was the forbidden zone of gods to someone like Dongwang the Great? Dongwang the Great was a god himself in the world they knew. If his only daughter were to encounter a life or death situation, how could he possibly not intervene? This was also why Futian could never attack Dongwang Diyuan without reservation. He did not dare overstep his boundary. Just as they were speaking, Futian frowned, and his expression changed drastically. Oh! He turned around and focused intently on a direction in the distance, and saw a figure in white appear. Like a ghost, it floated in the air without sound and approached with an invisible will locked onto both Futian and Dongwang Diyuan. Dong Wang Diyuan glanced at Yi Futian and thought that if it weren't for their previous battle, perhaps they would not have attracted the other party's attention. Buzz! The woman's figure disappeared immediately, and terrifying fighting will swept over Yi Futian like a tsunami. The woman, who seemed to have walked out of a painting, had erupted a horrific aura upon her. Yi Futian's figure disappeared from the spot in an instant, and the terrifying fighting will turned into a boundless and domineering fist or aura. At the same time, despite the distance between them, that fighting will was upon Yi Futian again, blasting him. As before, Yi Futian's only choice was to confront the onslaught head-on, and used Buddha's celerity to evade at the moment of collision. With a loud boom, Yi Futian's figure had already disappeared from this space and reappeared somewhere very far away. His breath was unsteady. Yi Futian glanced into the distance. He could escape the opponent's attack with Buddha's celerity, but what would happen to Dong Wang Diyuan? The injury that she sustained before must result from being attacked by the woman in white. At this time, the woman in white saw that Yi Futian had disappeared, so she floated towards Dong Wang Diyuan's position again. A terrifying fighting will now shrouded Dong Wang Diyuan's whole. Buzz! Another phantom appeared, approaching with incredible speed. That terrifying attack smashed directly at Dong Wang Diyuan, but she avoided it by turning slightly to the side with exceptional precision. She evaded that blow, but that violent fighting will still swept over her. All she could do was to raise her arms and blast out an attack of her own. Bang! A violent crash came down, and Dong Wang Diyuan's body flew back. The monstrous fighting will rushed into her body, impacting her internal organs. Blood came out of the corners of her mouth, as she had not yet recovered from her previous injuries. Even in her desperate state, she used the momentum of that force to retreat like a flash of lightning. Her movement was supremely intricate, and her speed was fast. However, if she wanted to move even faster, she would need to release the aura of the Great Path, and there was no way for her to do the same as Yi Futian. She could not move in space at will without releasing the aura of the Great Path, as he did with Buddha's celerity. However, in that instant, she seemed to have predicted the opponent's next move and avoided the frontal attack with precision and accuracy. Otherwise, it would have been much worse than that. The woman in white approached her like a ghost, raising her slender hands once again, slamming them towards Dong Wang Diyuan. Dong Wang Diyuan dodged again, but this time, the range of her opponent's attack covered the entire domain, and the great handprint of God shrouded the entire void. Just as Dong Wang Diyuan had said before, this woman of the living dead was very close to becoming self-aware, and she was learning at a rapid rate. Bang! Another horrific loud noise was heard. This time, Dong Wang Diyuan was attacked in the front, and her body was knocked back again. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her face became ashen. She stared at the woman in white in front of her with those beautiful eyes of hers. There was no panic or fear on her face, but just that icy arrogance. Roar! A loud boom came out, but it was the dragons chiming, and it was earth-shattering. As the Great Path erupted, a terrifying aura surged upward from Dong Wang Diyuan. It was no longer held back but was ultimately released. The ancestral dragon and the divine phoenix appeared, guarding her flanks. Inside of Dong Wang Diyuan, the soul of the ancestral dragon seemed to have awakened. A boundless and massive sacred ancestral dragon shrouded her body, releasing an unparalleled aura. It was the aura of a demon god. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. The ancestral dragon was the Lord of Naga, the most powerful demon god of the dragon clan, and was considered one of the most powerful demon monarchs in ancient times. One could only imagine how terrifying this aura was from such a terrifying existence. The will that erupted was the will of the ancestral dragon. At this moment, a suffocating coercion came down from the sky above, blasting down on Dong Wang Diyuan. But that ancestral dragon roared up into the sky unyieldingly, fighting against that terrifying will. The entire small world seemed to light up as an unparalleled monstrous will moved towards Dong Wang Diyuan below. This was the will of the gods. In this world, no other powers of the Great Path were permitted. When Yi Futian felt this terrifying will, he looked up into the sky. He knew that Dong Wang Diyuan had released her power, but facing the woman in white, she might not be able to escape if she did not release her power. Rather than just using her physical strength to fight, it might be better to wager everything for a shot. On the battlefield, a terrifying storm overwhelmed heaven and earth as the will of the small world descended, suppressing the will of the ancestral dragon directly. It was not that the ancestral dragon was not as mighty as the great emperor who ruled this world, but Dong Wang Diyuan had merely inherited the will of the ancestral dragon. The great emperor left the will of this space in this world to deal specifically with outsiders. Boom! A horrific will pressed down as Dong Wang Diyuan continued to fall. It seemed as if she was on the verge of being overpowered. Even so, her eyes were fixed in front of her as the massive wings of the divine phoenix spread out behind her. Terrifying divine flames flowed across the void, zooming in on the woman in white for the kill. The woman in white faced Dong Wang Diyuan, and her empty eyes reflected the reverse image of Dong Wang Diyuan. She slowly extended one hand, and suddenly, the fighting will between heaven and earth gathered into her palm, and a terrifying long spear emerged. Her body turned into a streamer of light and charged towards Dong Wang Diyuan. Whether it was the person or the spear, both seemed to be transformed by the god of war's will and morphed into one. The dragon god's sharp claws smashed down and collided with the spear dealt by the god of war. The space trembled violently, but the spear penetrated the dragon god's sharp claws, pulverizing them. Instantly it slammed into Dong Wang Diyuan and her defense of the great path. With a loud bang, the defense collapsed and shattered. Dong Wang Diyuan's body was repelled back as the will of terror fell upon her as well. Her body flew out in a flash of light directly from the sky. She landed hard on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The terrifying will continued incessantly, slaughtering madly and indiscriminately. Even the shadow of the dragon upon Dong Wang Diyuan was about to collapse. If the power of that will were allowed to keep attacking in this small world, Dong Wang Diyuan would, no doubt, perish here. After returning, Futian turned to look at Dong Wang Diyuan, who looked miserable. Then he thought, this place is truly terrifying. Even someone like Dong Wang Diyuan was put in such a pathetic state. Should I not have celerity, I would have ended up like her. Still, Dong Wang the Great would certainly come to her rescue if Dong Wang Diyuan was in mortal danger. How long do you plan to keep emanating your aura? Futian piped at Dong Wang Diyuan, standing close to her. Since he had blocked the woman in white's sight, she shifted her attention to him. Upon seeing that, Dong Wang Diyuan withdrew the will of the great path. At once, the overwhelming will within the small world dissipated completely. Lifting her head slowly, she stared at Futian with a complicated look. But he did not know what she was thinking. Suddenly, the woman in white materialized the intimidating spear forged by a fighting will. She pointed it at Futian, whose blood immediately ran cold at the sight of it. This woman of the living dead could mimic the cultivators who entered this place. Whoosh! The woman in white disappeared from the spot, following the manifestation of a phantasm. Instantly, Futian felt a powerful and overbearing fighting will charging at him. In the blink of an eye, Futian vanished from where he stood after activating celerity. Apart from him, Dong Wang Diyuan was nowhere to be found as well. Soon, Dong Wang Diyuan could be seen at a faraway location. She had been thrown there. Seeing that she was unprepared, she landed on the ground in a rather ungraceful manner. Futian unleashed a powerful aura of the great path at another place within the small world. Grabbing the divine ruler in his hand, he hurled it at the fast-approaching spear will. Bam! Futian was sent flying by the impact after a loud bang. Meanwhile, the ghastly fighting will collided with him in the sky, causing him to fall. Even so, he still retained control of his body. Right when the aura of the great path dispersed, his body hit the ground and created a deep pit. But within a split second, he vanished from the spot. Not even his shadow could be seen. Swoosh! The woman in white appeared out of nowhere and lowered her head to stare at the massive pit, only to realize that Futian was no longer there. Needless to say, she continued to learn and improve herself to the point of being capable of tracking him. His celerity could traverse a great distance. Yet she could still follow him. It could only mean that she was a fast learner. The living dead was growing incredibly quickly. The silhouette of Yi Futian could be seen at where Dong Wang Diyuan stood. At that moment, he felt a quiver inside his body as blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. "Let's go," Yi Futian uttered, slowly approaching Dong Wang Diyuan, who glared at him coldly. Yi Futian was stunned by the sight of her ungratefulness. He did not expect her to scowl at him after getting her away from danger by making himself a decoy. That was unbelievable. The living dead might have become sentient. "It will catch up to us soon. You will be stuck here if you don't leave now," Yi Futian stated impassively, intending to threaten her. After speaking, he moved forward to carry Dong Wang Diyuan's body and vanished from the scene speedily. As expected, the woman in white arrived there shortly after they left. She was still holding the spear that exuded a tremendous fighting will in her hand. A while later, she turned her hollow eyes toward where Dong Wang Diyuan had been. It seemed as if she could see. Yi Futian had already left that area and arrived at a place behind a hill in the small world at that moment. Dong Wang Diyuan lowered her head and saw his arm wrapped around her waist. At once, she turned to stare at him. To her surprise, Yi Futian was looking at her as well. They were within a hair's width of touching each other. "How long do you plan to keep holding me?" Dong Wang Diyuan asked in an icy tone. "Well, Princess Dong Wang has a nice figure," Yi Futian replied flippantly with a smile on his face. He let go of her. Reluctantly. Not only was she ungrateful, but she even behaved in such a contemptuous manner. Boom! An intangible aura emanated from Dong Wang Diyuan. She could hardly contain it. "What? You want to fight me?" Yi Futian stared at Dong Wang Diyuan and went on. "If you sustain more injuries, you will not have the strength to resist. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World." "You thanks." Dong Wang Diyuan shot him a cold look and responded. "Just how much do you like to play me for a fool? Even if I could not move at all, you would not dare to touch me." Her speech remained aloof and arrogant. Yi Futian furrowed his brows, set his eyes on her, and questioned. "What makes you think I wouldn't dare?" After speaking, he drew nearer to Dong Wang Diyuan, who peered at him indifferently without retreating. "I dare you," Dong Wang Diyuan declared. "Would gladly do that since your highness is so proactive about it." Yi Futian moved closer to Dong Wang Diyuan and wrapped his arms around her. The latter was dumbfounded for a while before unleashing a terrifying power from within. A disembodied hum of a dragon could be heard. Simultaneously, Yi Futian released a power comparable to hers. Pushing her against the cliff, he stared at her and moved his head closer. "Don't you dare!" Dong Wang Diyuan piped. "Are you going to complain to Dong Wang the Great later that I toyed with you today?" Yi Futian insinuated sarcastically. Right then, he slowly moved his head closer to Dong Wang Diyuan, who turned her face away from him. Next, he put his lips close to her ear and whispered, "Well, your personality really turns me off." With that, Yi Futian released her and shot her a frosty look. She had always been a supercilious woman who treated others condescendingly. She was the same as she had been in the Devil Imperial Palace. Therefore, Yi Futian revealed to her that he was unafraid. He did not do so because he couldn't be bothered. This was a humiliation to her. Although Dong Wang Diyuan had always been set free, she did not remove her gaze from Yi Futian. She was staring at him with a complicated look. As the daughter of Dong Wang the Great, she was constantly surrounded by the reverence and admiration of others. No one had ever dishonored her. However, she did not harbor any hatred toward him this time. Instead, a hint of sorrow could be seen in her beautiful eyes. Yi Futian felt that something was out of place when he looked at her. He could barely understand what was up with her. When they were fighting each other in the Devil Imperial Palace, sadness was written all over Dong Wang Diyuan's face right after Divine Requiem was played. He found an opening because of that. What kind of emotion could a princess of gentle birth like her be hiding? Everyone thought that she was born with a silver spoon. The person that she was currently was ascribed to her family background and innate gifts. Yi Futian sauntered forward, preparing to leave. "Hold on!" A voice was heard from behind him. So, he came to a halt but did not turn around. Then, he asked while facing his back to her. "What's the matter, Your Highness? We are trapped in this small world now. If we don't look for a way to break out of this place, we will never leave here. Furthermore, the living dead is becoming sentient now. Hence, it will only continue to become stronger," Dong Wang Diyuan explained. Yi Futian turned around to look at Dong Wang Diyuan, only to find her regaining her composure. Her eyes were calm as they stared at him. Even her arrogance earlier had dissipated completely. "So?" Yi Futian asked. Dong Wang Diyuan's words sounded fishy to him. "Let's form a coalition," Dong Wang Diyuan uttered. Yi Futian could not help but frown at Dong Wang Diyuan's words. He could not believe that she proposed to work with him. The snobbish Princess Dong Wang had always been acting dismissively toward him. She had been treating him in a condescending manner. Dong Wang Diyuan was all high and mighty before him, even after he became a powerful cultivator. Yet someone like her offered to ally with him. Did he somehow subdue the haughty Dong Wang Diyuan earlier? Yi Futian knitted his brows in confusion, while looking at Dong Wang Diyuan as the thought crossed his mind. Could it be that the high-born princess, who no one dared to defy, had a bizarre fetish? Otherwise, there was no better way to explain what just happened. Or perhaps, she would acknowledge someone who could overpower her. Yi Futian had a complicated look on his face as the thought came to mind. Dong Wang Diyuan noticed his expression as well. Although she was confused, she did not know what he was thinking about. Or else, she might unleash the aura of the Great Path to fight Yi Futian with all her strength if she came to know about it. He told you that the woman in white would fall into a deep sleep to absorb the will of this world. Now, she has become stronger after all the absorption. Moreover, the duration of her sleep is becoming shorter. We don't have much time left, Dong Wang Diyuan stated without giving much thought as to what Yi Futian had in his mind. She only wanted to focus on dealing with the woman in white. It was as if they were no longer enemies. There was no tension in the atmosphere like before. "Do you have a way to get us out of here?" Yi Futian questioned. "Ito. We can try it out," Dong Wang Diyuan responded. "What should we do?" Yi Futian peered at Dong Wang Diyuan, who came earlier than him. He reckoned that she should know more about the woman in white and this realm since she had witnessed the living dead's sleep and awakening. The place where she slept has a powerful divine-level matrix. That divine matrix is the reason she could assimilate the inexhaustible will in this realm with her. She would draw in the will of this small world whenever she slept. It would help if you took its place, Dong Wang Diyuan answered while looking at Yi Futian. "Me? You want me to take its place?" Yi Futian gazed at Dong Wang Diyuan in bafflement. "That's right." Dong Wang Diyuan nodded and continued. "The matrix will be activated when she sleeps. At that time, I will show up to interrupt her and lure her away. Then, you will enter the divine matrix to assimilate the will of this realm." Yi Futian frowned in suspicion and shot Dong Wang Diyuan a dubious look upon hearing that. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. Why would Princess Dong Wang give up such a good thing? Why don't you let me be the one to keep her busy while you enter the matrix to assimilate the will of this realm instead? Yi Futian suggested. This small world was left behind by an ancient great emperor. Besides, the divine matrix had assimilated the will of this realm with the woman in white. So why would she let him take the living dead's place? If anything went wrong, he would lose his life there. If the will of this realm had even a bit of consciousness left, he would die horribly. You've inherited several wills of the ancient great emperors. So I believe that you must be gifted in this area. The linchpin of this small world is the will left behind by a great emperor. The divine matrix is the core of this realm. I have faith that you can do it again, Dong Wang Diyuan said while staring at Yi Futian as if she thought highly of him. Yi Futian glanced at Dong Wang Diyuan skeptically and taunted. Since when did Princess Dong Wang start to have a high opinion of me? You know the strength of the woman in white. Unleashing the force of the great path to lure it out is extremely dangerous as well. You're not the only one risking their lives. Besides, you would gain a great benefit if you succeeded. Dong Wang Diyuan added. Who knows if you can actually inherit yet? Another will of the great emperor? Furthermore, the will of this realm is pretty complete and powerful. So, what do you say? It never crossed my mind that Princess Dong Wang could be so talkative, Yi Futian remarked. It was something unusual after all. Well then, let's continue to linger in this small world. Dong Wang Diyuan responded and closed her eyes to continue her cultivation. Yi Futian turned to look at Dong Wang Diyuan and replied, I agree to work with you. He had no choice since there was no better option. Dong Wang Diyuan could rely on Dong Wang the Great to escape. Although he could use celerity to avoid being trailed by the enemy, there was no telling how long this method would work. What if Dong Wang the Great showed up and brought Dong Wang Diyuan out of here safely and left him behind? No one could tell what might happen afterward. Besides, what Dong Wang Diyuan said earlier actually made sense. Even though it was dangerous, he could gain a lot from it if he succeeded. He had no qualms about living up to the name of Relic Reaper once more. At that moment, Yi Futian could not help but wonder if Dong Wang Diyuan had been putting up an act all this while. You've sustained a lot of injuries. It'd be risky for you to fight in this state. So why don't you allow me to heal you first? Yi Futian said while moving forward. How do you plan to do it without releasing the will of the Great Path? Dong Wang Diyuan asked. Yi Futian put on a smile as he looked at Dong Wang Diyuan. Naturally, she understood what he was playing at after seeing his expression. So she immediately declined. I don't need it. I can recover by myself. Okay, Yi Futian said and remained taciturn. Then he found himself a tranquil corner to sit and rest while waiting for Dong Wang Diyuan to recover. Despite not having any powerful force of the great path of life, Dong Wang Diyuan had the inheritance of ancestral dragon and divine phoenix. Hence, her toughness and recovery speed was exceptional. Yi Futian did not interrupt her but sat at the spot while enjoying the serenity of that place. A few moments later, Yi Futian turned to glance at Dong Wang Diyuan. Although she did not emanate the aura of the Great Path, a layer of divine light covered her entire body, further intensified her sanctitude. The light that reflected on her impeccable countenance had only added to her beauty. Yi Futian did not keep his gaze on her but lifted his head to look into the sky. He was met with the sight of a spine-chilling will that flowed in a certain direction. At once, the entire atmosphere was filled with overwhelming pressure. It has begun, Yi Futian murmured. He surmised that the woman in white must have fallen into a deep sleep again. At that time, Dong Wang Diyuan opened her eyes and looked at Yi Futian. She declared, Let's go! Deep within the ground of the ruins was a mountain that remained intact. This small world was built with superlative craftsmanship. There was a divine matrix on top of the mountain. At that time, divine light was radiating from it, manifesting light runes all over the place. At once, the overwhelming will of this realm flowed into the divine matrix. The woman in white closed her eyes in deep slumber in the middle of it. She remained still on the spot like a sculpture. The woman in white must be the descendant of the great emperor, who passed away during the Great War. The great emperor must have wished to resurrect their daughter. Therefore, they nourished her with their will, hoping that she would become sentient one day. Although she might become a totally different person after her resurrection, it could not change the fact that she was resurrected. So, that might very well be the wish of the great emperor. Yi Futian peered at the center of the divine matrix, where an overbearing will gathered. The woman in white was sleeping in there quietly while letting it seep into her body. She was not a living cultivator. So she had been revitalized by the will of the great emperor for countless years. Unlike Yi Futian, she would not devour it forcefully. However, she would be unrivaled in strength after being born this way. After all, she was already more than just a cultivator, in a way. When the day she finally became sentient arrived, no one could hold a candle to her apart from great emperors. Let's begin, Dong Wang Diyuan uttered. Next, she moved toward the void and walked in the woman in white's direction, which was the divine matrix. Boom! Dong Wang Diyuan raised her hand and hurled a punch that contained fist will with pure strength. She did not unleash the force of the Great Path. Her attack was launched toward the woman in white inside the divine matrix. Yet the fist will was blocked by the fighting will around the divine matrix upon impact. It did not reach the woman in white, who was still in her slumber. It's not strong enough. After furrowing her brows, Dong Wang Diyuan released the will of the Great Path without hesitation. At that moment, the power of ancestral dragon and divine phoenix exploded from within her. The cry of the dragon and phoenix caused the void to tremble. Pure-blooded dragon and divine phoenix flew toward the sky and surrounded her. After lifting her hand, Tianqing divine sword blasted off and turned into a gust. In that instant, the silhouette of the divine phoenix carried the divine sword and launched toward its target. Covering in the flame of divine phoenix, Tianqing divine sword launched toward the divine matrix, penetrated the light screen of the will, and aimed at its target in the center. Suddenly, a sonorous could be heard when a massive phantom of phoenix manifested. It flew toward the middle where the woman in white had been. At that moment, the woman in white opened her eyes. Her soulless eyes had become vibrant. Lifting her hand, she launched an attack with a tremendous power that traversed space itself. Immediately, the divine sword shattered as the phantom of divine phoenix broke into pieces. After that, the will of this realm charged toward Dong Wang Diyuan, who unleashed her strongest defense to fend off the attack while setting her eyes forward. With that, the woman in white strode toward Dong Wang Diyuan and stretched her palm forward. Instantly, she formed a divine sword with the fighting will, attempting to imitate the latter. Whoosh! Dong Wang Diyuan retreated backward. Although the woman in white had become sentient, she hoped the latter would not be too intelligent. A powerful fighting will locked onto Dong Wang Diyuan's form. In the next moment, the woman in white moved forward, getting closer to the direction the former fled. After that, Futian looked at the divine matrix and noticed the divine light around it remained illuminated. A while later, it gradually came to a halt. So, he saw the opportunity to move. In a flash, his silhouette could be seen in the middle of the divine matrix. Swoosh! Futian felt a terrifying will flood into his body, one that the gods left behind. He was instantly drowned by it as it tried to invade his will frantically, trying to devour him. Bang! At that time, the will of the world tree emanated from Futian's body, consuming the power of the will in this realm. The will of the world tree and the will of Tianqing intertwined with one another, creating an invisible force that filled the atmosphere. He began to experience what happened during the power struggle with the will of the Maharaja. He could feel an unparalleled power in the form of a powerful will engulfing him after he drew the power of the world tree into this small world. The former inundated him with its powerful will, attempting to swallow his will. The intense will assaulted Futian because he was not the woman in white. Hence, he could not yoke together with this will. The woman in white was born in this small world, thus she could match up with it perfectly. However, he used the power of the world tree to merge his will with this small world, just like what he did before. At once, he could see the entire landscape within the small world through the divine matrix. The first person he saw was Dong Wang Diyuan, who was in imminent danger since the woman in white had been launching deadly attacks at her. Futian squeezed his brows together all of a sudden when he noticed another cultivator within the realms. It was Ji Wudao. Futian could not believe his eyes. The successor of the heavenly emperor was inside the small world as well. On top of that, Ji Wudao was heading toward him. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. Swoosh! A silhouette could be seen rushing toward him. It was Ji Wudao who infiltrated the divine matrix and dashed in his direction at high speed. Without a doubt, Ji Wudao has arrived earlier and had been lying in wait to ambush him. After Ji Wudao raised his hand, an enormous palm appeared inside the divine matrix from nowhere. It immediately turned into a frightening vortex that engulfed the force of nature. Futian felt a tremendous suction force pulling his body, causing the power inside his body to leak out involuntarily. It felt as if that suction force could consume everything in its path. It was a terrifying sight to behold. In fact, Futian felt as though the power of the will that assimilated with his was about to be swallowed up by the vortex. With a thought, Futian summoned a divine sword. Then he hurled it at Ji Wudao with a force so tremendous that it broke through the barrier of space. Still, the latter did not retract his palm. Instead, the powerful vortex sucked the entire divine sword into it like a bottomless abyss. Futian's heart skipped a beat at the sight of it. With a thought, he unleashed a great palm and launched it toward Ji Wudao violently. It was so colossal that it covered a vast area. Boom! A deafening bang sounded when the great palm smashed to smithereens. Ji Wudao could be seen entering the divine matrix as a blood-curdling power flowed around his body. Right away, the forces of nature flooded into his body as if it were a black hole capable of engulfing everything within its vicinity. At that moment, Futian suddenly recounted something he heard before entering God's relic. Rumor had it that a mysterious and powerful cultivator emerged out of the blue and plundered many ruins. He was ruthless yet highly formidable. He could consume the inheritance of the ruins forcefully, and caused numerous strong individuals to lose their lives in his hand. This person had reached the highest possible cultivation level. Therefore, the people he targeted were powerful cultivators from all the known realms. The fact only added to his great power. Many had surmised that he might be an old monstrous cultivator who had been living a long life. After putting two and two together, Futian had an epiphany about who that mysterious figure might be. Ji Wudao, heir of the Heaven Realm, successor of the old Heaven Court, with peerless magnificence. He had inherited the will of the Heavenly Emperor, and was second to none in the world. In the fight against Dongwang Diyuan, he had suppressed her without question and garnered the attention of everyone with his excellent talent. But Futian was a little surprised. He didn't expect Ji Wudao to have this other side as a top predator who could devour the power of relics. He vaguely understood now how those statues of the gods were destroyed in the old Heaven Court. Ji Wudao may be stronger than he imagined. No wonder he had gone to the center of the earth to devour the power of Yin. He had been in deep hiding. In the past, although everyone knew that he was strong, they had no idea just how strong he was. Boom! Ji Wudao's power exploded, and the phantom of a divine beast appeared between heaven and earth, as if it was a divine beast born out of chaos. It was rumored that in ancient times, this divine beast from the chaos could devour an entire corner of the world. It was a truly terrifying supreme divine beast. Two separate wills erupted. In the void of this small world, the phantom of the chaotic divine beast appeared, which was manifested by Ji Wudao's will. It was madly devouring the will of this world. This chaotic divine beast wanted to devour even Futian's will, which was extremely frightening. In that nothingness, a boundless and massive divine shadow appeared upon the body of the chaotic divine beast. It was the phantom of a demon god. It was formed in the shape of Ji Wudao, but it had a powerful demonic aura, like the true incarnation of a demon god. At another place in the void, the will of terror gathered and vaguely transformed into a gigantic and boundless divine ruler. The ruler was permeated with the will of the supreme rules of the Great Path, as if it was transformed by the will of the heavenly path. Boom! The chaotic demon god that had devoured all the power of the world wanted to engulf everything else next. He even wanted to swallow the divine ruler that had appeared along with everything else. He was extremely overbearing, and he feared nothing. The divine ruler increased in size, and a terrifying will pervaded from the divine ruler. It then turned into a light, slaughtering at the chaotic demonic beast. A horrific tornado engulfed the divine ruler within its vortex. The chaotic divine beast's mouth was wide open. When that great mouth opened up, it was bigger than the divine beast itself, swallowing a side of the sky in an instant, and the boundless divine ruler disappeared into that gigantic mouth as well. After the divine ruler rushed into his mouth, the chaotic divine beast closed its mouth, but then his massive body began vibrating violently. Bang! He spat out something vehemently and unexpectedly, and the divine ruler emerged again, causing his massive body to shake vigorously. He was not able to completely swallow the divine ruler, which had nearly pulverized his innards. He stared at the divine ruler. His gigantic mouth was still open, swallowing up the terrifying fighting will between heaven and earth. The phantom of the demon god stared at the divine ruler, looking a little stunned. At this moment on the outside, Ji Wudao also regarded Yi Futian with surprise. The two were colliding fiercely, engaging in close-quarter combat. As their physical bodies brutally collided, the space where the divine matrix occupied was convulsing furiously. What kind of divine ruler was that? Ji Wudao asked Yi Futian when the two were blasting at each other. This was the first time he encountered a situation where he could not do what he wanted, like devouring the will of the divine ruler. He had never failed before. Even the will of the ancient great emperor had been swallowed up and being used by him. When he fought Dong Wang Diyuan, he had just revealed part of his ability. In this world, in the land of the seven realms, no one had more expertise than him. He kept quiet for many years, improving himself silently and constantly getting stronger. It wasn't until now, when the world had undergone such major changes, and with the emergence of the heaven realm, that he had no choice but to appear in front of the world, demonstrating his unparalleled talent. The world had significantly changed, and the path to emperorship had appeared. When he became a great emperor, he would send the rest of the 6 great emperors to their deaths. Whether it was the human ancestor who had dominated the past and the present, the devil emperor who had ruled the world, or Dong Wang the Great who was 1 in a million, they all had to die. Everyone in this world had failed her. Ji Wudao was getting stronger as he fought. And a monstrous will came rolling off of his body as if he had transformed into the heavenly emperor himself. His eyes seemed boundless and dominant. It was as if he was the Lord of heaven and earth, looking over all that was in the world. His attacks were equally domineering. Every strike he dealt was one with heaven and earth. They may seem like ordinary attacks, but the power within was incredible. What? At this moment, Ji Wudao frowned. He sensed that Dong Wang Diyuan was in dire danger on a battlefield somewhere else. Under the frantic attacks by the woman in white, Dong Wang Diyuan, who was already injured, could not hold on much longer. Buzz! Ji Wudao's figure was gone in a flash as he disappeared directly from where he was. Then, the terrifying aura of the great path roared out from him without any pretense. An imperial might emerged first, then a frightening shadow of a deity appeared behind him as if a great emperor had descended into this world. A most mighty sword swung out to silence the world. The sword of the heavenly emperor unleashed as if to break open the sky. The woman in white, who was about to attack Dong Wang Diyuan, suddenly turned around. The divine sword that was forming from the will in her palm collided with the sword of the heavenly emperor. When the two mighty swords made contact in the void, both of them pulverized and shattered into pieces. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. Naturally, Yi Futian saw everything. The surprised look on his face clearly showed that he was caught off guard because of his astonishment. During his fight with Yi Futian, Ji Wudao shifted his focus and diverted his attention to saving Dong Wang Diyuan. What kind of person was Ji Wudao? Based on Yi Futian's limited understanding of Ji Wudao, he knew this man was definitely a top character of the world, standing at the peak of all existences. Furthermore, judging from everything he had done before, he could be considered a kingpin. Such a person would not be easily bewitched by the beauty of Dong Wang Diyuan. To a person of this caliber, beautiful women were no more than mortal flesh and would not sway him much, if at all. However, he took the initiative to save Dong Wang Diyuan in her hours of desperation, even if that meant giving up the fight with Yi Futian here. This meant that Ji Wudao and Dong Wang Diyuan had some kind of an existing relationship with one another. Considering that they were both experts of Tianqing Divine Sword, perhaps there was some kind of connection between them. At this time, the woman in white was floating in the void, and the brilliance in her eyes was intensified even more. She looked up at the sky and stretched out her hands. Suddenly, the will of this world flowed towards her madly as she bathed in that will. The woman in white was now more terrifying than ever. When she took a step forward, it was not to entangle herself with Dong Wang Diyuan or Ji Wudao. Instead, like a bolt of lightning, she descended amid the divine matrix where Yi Futian was. The woman in white, bathed in the will of the gods, had an aura that was terrifying to the extreme at the moment. It was far stronger than what it was before. She raised her hands and slammed them into Yi Futian. Likewise, a supremely powerful aura of the great path erupted from Yi Futian as he directly took on the blow. With a loud boom, Yi Futian disappeared from the spot and reappeared somewhere else, his blood tumbling and roiling within his body. Then, he saw the woman in white walking directly into the divine matrix. She closed her eyes. The next moment, the divine light of the divine matrix shrouded the entire small world, and the will of the gods in this small world instantly flowed into and merged with her body. Even though Yi Futian and the others had released their powers of the great path, they were not being attacked again. This small world was trembling violently now. It was as if it was on the verge of total collapse. They knew that the woman in white was about to complete the final step. Yi Futian and Ji Wudao didn't make another move, and Dong Wang Diyuan stood there as well. No one continued to attack them. They raised their heads to look at this small world. Infinite will madly poured into the body of the woman in white, becoming a part of her. This small world was trembling severely, accompanied by roaring booming sounds. The small world was beginning to fall apart. Countless cracks appeared on the stone walls around the small world, as lights were coming out from the cracks, causing the cracks to enlarge continuously. Booming! The small world began to disintegrate, and pieces of the boulders pulverized and shattered, being destroyed in utter madness. The bodies of Yi Futian and the others were shuddering as this small world was falling apart. Everything seemed to be on the verge of total destruction, without any exception. However, the woman in white remained motionless, quietly suspended amid the divine matrix. She bathed in the divine glory of the gods, looking peerlessly splendid. Failed, said Dong Wang Diyuan. Yi Futian was not able to capture the god's will in the other's stead. She did not know if he was interrupted by Ji Wudao. If Ji Wudao had not appeared, would Yi Futian have been successful? However, although they failed, this side of the world was disintegrating, which meant that they should be able to get out now. But what would this woman in white do? Would she continue to attack them? The collapse of the small world continued. Yi Futian stared at the woman in white, and no one knew what he was thinking at the moment. At this time, outside the forbidden zone of the gods, they saw that the mountains opposite the canyon were caving in and shattering. A violent earthquake was erupting below. The area they were in was shaking furiously, and they couldn't help the shocked looks on their faces. What was happening? Voices questioned one another, and everyone guessed what was to take place. It's inside the forbidden zone of the gods, someone said. Could it be that someone succeeded? Countless conjectures surfaced in everyone's mind, and everyone was watching. The princess of the divine prefecture, Dong Wang Diyuan, had entered inside. Yi Futian, the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace, went in as well. They were the most outstanding genius talents of this world. Perhaps there was a real chance for them to successfully crack the secrets of the Forbidden Zone and obtain the inheritance of the gods. Just as they were guessing, the space on that side exploded and pulverized with madness. Afterward, they saw several figures soaring into the sky and appearing high above the firmament. Everyone's eyes sharpened when they saw who these people were. All of them had released an incomparably overwhelming aura of the Great Path. Dong Wang Diyuan, Yi Futian, Ji Wudao as well. When did he enter the Forbidden Zone? Someone remarked as they looked at the other figure, which was Ji Wudao, the heir of the Heaven Realm. He was also a peerless figure in his own right, a genius talent who ruled at the top of the world. He was there as well, and the cultivators on the outside didn't seem to know when he had gotten inside. That is, everyone was looking in a specific direction, and a figure in white was standing opposite the three top genius talents. She was like a fairy that had walked out of a painting. She was not of this world. Her temperament was second to none. Who is she? The hearts of all the cultivators palpitated and sensed that the aura on her body was terrifying beyond words. Dong Wangdian and the other two stared at her with extreme vigilance. These three top-level enchanting geniuses were wary of the woman in white. Could she be one of the ancients? An ancient god from inside the Forbidden Zone? The powerful will that permeated from her was akin to the will of the gods themselves, which instigated the changes in their surroundings. That pressure of might fell upon these cultivators and made them feel as if extreme coercion were forcing them into worship. Princess, take care, Ji Wudao said to Dong Wangdian before he was gone in a flash. After he felt that terrifying will exude from the woman in white, he knew that it was impossible to achieve what he came to do. He could only look for other opportunities in the future. Yi Futian glanced at Ji Wudao, who was leaving, and thought that this was a decisive man, someone who could indeed achieve incredible feats in the world. He might become Yi Futian's most powerful opponent in the future, a contender on the road to emperorship. What's the relationship between the princess and the Heaven Realm? Yi Futian asked Dong Wangdian. He was a little curious, and he was almost certain that there must be some kind of relationship between the Heaven Realm and Dong Wangdian. Otherwise, Ji Wudao would not treat Dong Wangdian the way he did. Dong Wangdian didn't respond, she didn't even look at him. It seemed like she had reverted to her previous cold and arrogant attitude. At this time, the woman in white opened her beautiful eyes as she looked at the two of them. The fighting will upon her was monstrous, shrouding the boundless space. Its force of oppression was so great that those cultivators who were around felt nearly suffocated. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. Her eyes were clearer and brighter, revealing an evident brilliance. Clearly, the plan of the ancient gods was coming to pass and proven to be successful. The woman in white was showing signs of intelligence, and today, after countless years, she had been reborn. Her eyes fixed on Dong Wangdian, and a hint of coldness flashed through her eyes. At this moment, Dong Wangdian felt a coldness all over her body as she sensed the murderous intent from the woman in white. However, at this moment, Yi Futian took a step forward and appeared in front of the woman in white, blocking Dong Wangdian. Many were stunned when they saw this. Yi Futian and Dong Wangdian were known to be sworn enemies, so why did he help her to block this attack? Go away! Dong Wangdian said coldly as the phantoms of the ancestral dragon, and the divine phoenix rose upward until a terrifying aura erupted from her. Princess is truly cold to the core, without any regard for our previous history. Have you forgotten everything that happened before in the ruins? Yi Futian asked her. These words surprised those who heard them in the distance. Did something happen between Yi Futian and Dong Wangdian in the Forbidden Zone? These two were the descendants of Dong Wang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing, respectively. Did they have some kind of forbidden romance? That shouldn't be the case, however. Cultivators like them were usually determined and unwavering, unlikely to be affected by simple emotions, such as love. This was likely Yi Futian's deliberate effort to taunt Princess Dong Wang. He was very bold. Sure enough, a wisp of murderous intent emerged from Dong Wangdian, and it was tyrannical to the extreme. She raised her hand as the true dragon pounced from it, and slammed down upon Yi Futian. Yi Futian turned his back to Dong Wangdian, and the divine light was flowing upon him. A divine sword appeared behind him, its sharp edge directly pierced through the palm of the true dragon. Yi Futian said, Indeed, women have been the more ruthless species since the beginning of times. How dare he! When others heard Yi Futian's taunting, they couldn't help but fear for him. This was the princess of the divine prefecture, and he dared speak to her in such a flippant manner. However, it was obvious that Yi Futian's strength was powerful to the point for him to stand shoulder to shoulder with Dong Wangdian. At this time, an even stronger aura pervaded, attracting the attention of all the cultivators. They saw the woman in white move, and Dong Wangdian and Yi Futian did not want to continue the fighting. The woman in white took a step forward and appeared in front of Yi Futian in an instant, but Yi Futian didn't dodge or evade. He stood where he was as a fierce will of the great emperor swept over him, which made his white hair dance madly in the air and his clothing flutter. It was as if he was about to be swallowed up by that horrific will. But under the shocking gazes of all the bystanders, Futian remained standing there motionlessly, his eye fixed intently on the woman in white. Even Dong Wang Diyuan, who was standing behind Futian, couldn't help but shudder in her heart. She stared straight in front of her and wondered, this Futian, was he crazy? If the woman in white were to deal a fatal blow suddenly, wouldn't Futian be seeking his own death? However, she was stunned to find that the woman in white did not attack but merely stood in front of Futian. That violent will was still being released fiercely, but she did not attack Futian. There was a hint of uncertainties in the woman's beautiful eyes. Right now, her consciousness was a little confused, and she was struggling. The white-haired man in front of her felt so familiar. It was as if they had known each other for many years. That familiarity was coming from her soul, imprinted in her consciousness. She even had a feeling that this white-haired man was part of her and existed in her mind. "Who are you?" For the first time, the woman in white spoke. Her tone was a little unnatural, even a little stiff. Her beautiful eyes were fastened on Futian. "Tam you," Futian said to the woman in white. What he said caused Dong Wang Diyuan's eyes to sharpen. Futian didn't fail? Futian and Ji Wudao didn't make another move, and Dong Wang Diyuan stood there as well. No one continued to attack them. They raised their heads to look at this small world. Infinite will madly poured into the body of the woman in white, becoming a part of her. This small world was trembling severely, accompanied by roaring booming sounds. The small world was beginning to fall apart. Countless cracks appeared on the stone walls around the small world, as lights were coming out from the cracks, causing the cracks to enlarge continuously. Booming! The small world began to disintegrate, and pieces of the boulders pulverized and shattered, being destroyed in utter madness. The bodies of Futian and the others were shuddering as this small world was falling apart. Everything seemed to be on the verge of total destruction, without any exception. However, the woman in white remained motionless, quietly suspended amid the divine matrix. She bathed in the divine glory of the gods, looking peerlessly splendid. "Failed," said Dong Wang Diyuan. Futian was not able to capture the god's will in the other's stead. She did not know if he was interrupted by Ji Wudao. If Ji Wudao had not appeared, would Futian have been successful? However, although they failed, this side of the world was disintegrating, which meant that they should be able to get out now. But what would this woman in white do? Would she continue to attack them? The collapse of the small world continued. Futian stared at the woman in white, and no one knew what he was thinking at the moment. At this time, outside the forbidden zone of the gods, they saw that the mountains opposite the canyon were caving in and shattering. A violent earthquake was erupting below. The area they were in was shaking furiously, and they couldn't help the shocked looks on their faces. What was happening? Voices questioned one another, and everyone guessed what was to take place. "It's inside the forbidden zone of the gods," someone said. Could it be that someone succeeded? Countless conjectures surfaced in everyone's mind, and everyone was watching. The princess of the divine prefecture, Dong Wang Diyuan, had entered inside. Futian, the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace, went in as well. They were the most outstanding genius talents of this world, perhaps there was a real chance for them to successfully crack the secrets of the Forbidden Zone and obtain the inheritance of the gods. Just as they were guessing, the space on that side exploded and pulverized with madness. Afterward, they saw several figures soaring into the sky and appearing high above the firmament. Everyone's eyes sharpened when they saw who these people were. All of them had released an incomparably overwhelming aura of the Great Path. Dong Wang Diyuan, Futian, Ji Wudao as well. When did he enter the Forbidden Zone? Someone remarked as they looked at the other figure, which was Ji Wudao, the heir of the Heaven Realm. He was also a peerless figure in his own right, a genius talent who ruled at the top of the world. He was there as well, and the cultivators on the outside didn't seem to know when he had gotten inside. That is, everyone was looking in a specific direction, and a figure in white was standing opposite the three top genius talents. She was like a fairy that had walked out of a painting. She was not of this world. Her temperament was second to none. Who is she? The hearts of all the cultivators palpitated and sensed that the aura on her body was terrifying beyond words. Dong Wangdian and the other two stared at her with extreme vigilance. These three top-level enchanting geniuses were wary of the woman in white. Could she be one of the ancients? An ancient god from inside the Forbidden Zone? The powerful will that permeated from her was akin to the will of the gods themselves, which instigated the changes in their surroundings. That pressure of might fell upon these cultivators and made them feel as if extreme coercion were forcing them into worship. "Princess, take care," Ji Wudao said to Dong Wangdian before he was gone in a flash. After he felt that terrifying will exude from the woman in white, he knew that it was impossible to achieve what he came to do. He could only look for other opportunities in the future. Yi Futian glanced at Ji Wudao, who was leaving, and thought that this was a decisive man, someone who could indeed achieve incredible feats in the world. He might become Yi Futian's most powerful opponent in the future, a contender on the road to emperorship. "What's the relationship between the princess and the heaven realm?" Yi Futian asked Dong Wangdian. He was a little curious, and he was almost certain that there must be some kind of relationship between the heaven realm and Dong Wangdian. Otherwise, Ji Wudao would not treat Dong Wangdian the way he did. Dong Wangdian didn't respond, she didn't even look at him. It seemed like she had reverted to her previous cold and arrogant attitude. At this time, the woman in white opened her beautiful eyes as she looked at the two of them. The fighting will upon her was monstrous, shrouding the boundless space. Its force of oppression was so great that those cultivators who were around felt nearly suffocated. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. Her eyes were clearer and brighter, revealing an evident brilliance. Clearly, the plan of the ancient gods was coming to pass and proven to be successful. The woman in white was showing signs of intelligence, and today, after countless years, she had been reborn. Her eyes fixed on Dong Wangdian, and a hint of coldness flashed through her eyes. At this moment, Dong Wangdian felt a coldness all over her body as she sensed the murderous intent from the woman in white. However, at this moment, Yi Futian took a step forward and appeared in front of the woman in white, blocking Dong Wangdian. Many were stunned when they saw this. Yi Futian and Dong Wangdian were known to be sworn enemies, so why did he help her to block this attack? "Go away!" Dong Wangdian said coldly as the phantoms of the ancestral dragon, and the divine phoenix rose upward until a terrifying aura erupted from her. "Princess is truly cold to the core, without any regard for our previous history. Have you forgotten everything that happened before in the ruins?" Yi Futian asked her. These words surprised those who heard them in the distance. Did something happen between Yi Futian and Dong Wangdian in the Forbidden Zone? These two were the descendants of Dong Wang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing, respectively. Did they have some kind of forbidden romance? That shouldn't be the case, however. Cultivators like them were usually determined and unwavering, unlikely to be affected by simple emotions, such as love. This was likely Yi Futian's deliberate effort to taunt Princess Dong Wang. He was very bold. Sure enough, a wisp of murderous intent emerged from Dong Wangdian, and it was tyrannical to the extreme. She raised her hand as the true dragon pounced from it, and slammed down upon Yi Futian. Yi Futian turned his back to Dong Wangdian, and the divine light was flowing upon him. A divine sword appeared behind him, its sharp edge directly pierced through the palm of the true dragon. Yi Futian said, "Indeed, women have been the more ruthless species since the beginning of times. How dare he!" When others heard Yi Futian's taunting, they couldn't help but fear for him. This was the princess of the divine prefecture, and he dared speak to her in such a flippant manner. However, it was obvious that Yi Futian's strength was powerful to the point for him to stand shoulder to shoulder with Dong Wangdian. At this time, an even stronger aura pervaded, attracting the attention of all the cultivators. They saw the woman in white move, and Dong Wangdian and Yi Futian did not want to continue the fighting. The woman in white took a step forward and appeared in front of Yi Futian in an instant, but Yi Futian didn't dodge or evade. He stood where he was as a fierce will of the great emperor swept over him, which made his white hair dance madly in the air and his clothing flutter. It was as if he was about to be swallowed up by that horrific will. But under the shocking gazes of all the bystanders, Yi Futian remained standing there motionlessly, his eye fixed intently on the woman in white. Even Dong Wangdiyuan, who was standing behind Yi Futian, couldn't help but shudder in her heart. She stared straight in front of her and wondered, this Yi Futian, was he crazy? If the woman in white were to deal a fatal blow suddenly, wouldn't Yi Futian be seeking his own death? However, she was stunned to find that the woman in white did not attack but merely stood in front of Yi Futian. That violent will was still being released fiercely, but she did not attack Yi Futian. There was a hint of uncertainties in the woman's beautiful eyes. Right now, her consciousness was a little confused, and she was struggling. The white-haired man in front of her felt so familiar. It was as if they had known each other for many years. That familiarity was coming from her soul, imprinted in her consciousness. She even had a feeling that this white-haired man was part of her and existed in her mind. "Who are you?" For the first time, the woman in white spoke. Her tone was a little unnatural, even a little stiff. Her beautiful eyes were fastened on Yi Futian. "Damn you," Yi Futian said to the woman in white. What he said caused Dong Wangdiyuan's eyes to sharpen. Yi Futian didn't fail? "I am you?" A strange look flashed through Dong Wangdiyuan's beautiful eyes when she heard Yi Futian's words. She now remembered one of Yi Futian's other monikers, the Relic Reaper. Inside the relics of the Maharaja at the ruins of the gods, Yi Futian had gained control over the will of the Maharaja and merged as one with it so that Yi Futian could incarnate as the Maharaja while in the relic. This suggested that Yi Futian could integrate with the wills of the great emperors. Therefore, previously, they had planned for Yi Futian to take the place of the woman in white in the divine matrix and inherit the will of the great emperor. Still, the appearance of Ji Wudao interrupted their plan. Even so, Yi Futian did not seem to have failed. Was it during that process that Yi Futian was able to fuse his own will with the will of the great emperor? Because Yi Futian had done it before, Dong Wangdiyuan had no reason to doubt that he was capable of such means. However, did this mean that in the will inherited by the woman, there was also the will from Yi Futian within? But even Yi Futian did not fully integrate with the will of the great emperor. All he managed to do was achieve part of it, hence the situation in front of them, and why the woman in white sensed a kinship with Yi Futian. There was basically nothing wrong with Dong Wangdiyuan's estimation. The woman in white was initially conceived from the will of the great emperor. At this point, she who had appeared in the outside world was different from all the rest of the cultivators. She was a special existence. When she heard what Yi Futian said, she did not feel them strange but looked rather thoughtful instead. Her intelligence had just been formed, and everything was unknown to her. In her previous battle with Dong Wangdiyuan, she was learning from it. Now that Yi Futian told the woman that he was her, it did not really shock Dong Wangdiyuan too much. However, everyone other than Dong Wangdiyuan looked at this with stunned expressions. In this quiet space, everything seemed a little creepy. Exactly what had happened? What happened in the forbidden zone of the gods between the woman in white, Dong Wangdiyuan, Yi Futian, and Ji Wudao? What did Yi Futian mean by what he said? Obviously, Yi Futian and the woman in white were not the same people. She could not possibly be another incarnation of Yi Futian himself. If that were the case, she would have been a man and not a woman. But no one knew that even Yi Futian himself did not have absolute certainty at this point. He had only attempted by merging part of his will into the will of the great emperor. He had no idea how much impact he was able to achieve. But now, it seemed that he was indeed able to affect the woman in white considerably. "You and I are one. In the future you follow me. Wherever I am, you will be there also," Yi Futian said to her. The woman in white did not seem to understand that concept very well, so she did not respond immediately. She regarded Yi Futian with those beautiful eyes. Only after a while did she nod lightly. In agreement. "Success!" Yi Futian exclaimed in his heart. If he could control the woman in white, she would be another powerful weapon in his arsenal. She was born from the will of the great emperor, and her combat effectiveness would far surpass his own. Dong Wang Diyuan's expression was even more surprised. She didn't expect that Yi Futian would succeed in some other way. He did not seize the inheritance of the great emperor's will by taking the other's place, but he controlled the woman in white. Yi Futian turned around to look at Dong Wang Diyuan and said, "Thank you, Princess, for everything on this trip." He did not mean it as a sarcastic comment. He was truly grateful to Dong Wang Diyuan. No matter her motivation, the final outcome was in his favor and allowed him to control the woman in white. He had reaped a lot on this trip. Dong Wang Diyuan cast a glance at Yi Futian before she turned around and walked away without making any response. She then walked into the void and left. Watching her departing figure, Yi Futian had a feeling that he was more and more unable to see through Dong Wang Diyuan. Before, Yi Futian did not have a favorable impression of Dong Wang Diyuan. But this time in the ruins, he seemed to have seen another side to Dong Wang Diyuan. Perhaps the person she presented to the outside was not her real self. The cultivators in the distance could not help but wonder about many things when they saw Dong Wang Diyuan's departure. What happened in the ruins? And why did Yi Futian thank Dong Wang Diyuan, his sworn enemy? And why was there not the slightest bit of tension between them? Everything aside, if they were talking about combat effectiveness, between Yi Futian and Dong Wang Diyuan today, who was stronger and who was weaker? Yi Futian glanced at the woman in white next to him. Although he was able to control her temporarily, it was no guarantee of her stability. He would still need to observe her for some time to be sure. If there was an unforeseeable event, he may not be able to keep her under control. In today's Yi Imperial Palace, there was the Divine Matrix. If something were to happen, she could be subdued by the Matrix. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. It seemed that he had to get back there first. "Let's go," said Yi Futian. Then he flickered away as the woman in white followed close behind, traveling with him. Everyone watched the two of them leave. By the time they looked at the area below, the forbidden zone of the gods had disappeared and turned into nothing but dust. Third, that Yi Futian had a reputation as the Relic Reaper many years ago in the original realm. I just didn't expect that even the forbidden zone of the gods could not stop him. Judging from the situation, he must have discovered the secrets of the relics. Someone said. Yi Futian of the original realm was known for cracking open the codes of any ruins. Whenever the inheritance of the great emperor befell him, he had never had any trouble inheriting it. Who knows who the woman in white is? Someone commented, watching the figures disappearing into the distance. Yi Futian accelerated his speed as he moved forward, and the woman in white followed suit in order to catch up with him. Later on, even when Yi Futian was traveling with Buddha's celerity, the woman in white had no trouble keeping up with him, and her speed did not lag at all, demonstrating her prowess. Moreover, the two were different now. They could sense each other's existence and location. Yi Futian returned to Yi Imperial Palace with the woman in white as they made their way back. Inside Yi Imperial Palace, Yi Futian walked in the front, the woman in white followed behind. Palace Lord! Palace Lord! Seeing Yi Futian's return, many people bowed and paid their respect when they saw them. They looked at the woman behind Yi Futian with some curiosity. The Palace Lord went out and brought back such an exceptional woman. Her appearance and temperament were simply extraordinary. Yi Futian nodded to acknowledge everyone. As he continued to walk forward, he was moving all the way towards the higher parts of the heavenly imperial palace. When he got to the sky stairwell, many familiar figures began to emerge one after another. They all had different expressions when they saw that Yi Futian had returned with the woman in white. Palace Lord, who is this? Lord Chen asked with curiosity. Yi Futian turned his head, but it was not easy for him to make the introduction. He looked at the woman in white and said, "How about I give you a name?" The woman in white looked at Yi Futian, then nodded her head lightly. She was like a newborn baby who had no understanding of anything. The people around them displayed a strange look. The Palace Lord was unbelievable. After he took a trip to the outside, not only did he kidnap such an extraordinary woman to bring back, but he was going to give her a name? Everyone looked at Futian with some envy. The palace lord was the palace lord for a reason. This woman was unusual, and her appearance was second to none. It seemed that the palace lord might be having a new addition in his household. Futian would not know anything these guys were thinking. He looked at the woman in white, thought for a moment, and said, "You descended from the great emperor and were born from the small world. Let's call you Ling Long One." Ling Long, the woman in white muttered, then nodded slightly to acknowledge it. She did not have any opposing opinion, feeling that the name Futian gave her was very comforting. Futian's words explained the origin of the woman in white, which greatly startled everyone around him. She was descended from the great emperor and was nurtured and born in the small world. If so, this woman indeed had an extraordinary origin. "Don't gather around here, go cultivate," Futian said to everyone, then walked forward and towards the palace that was at the highest point. Futian came to the cultivation area behind the palace, where Jiayu was cultivating. When she saw that Futian was back, she stood up as Futian came to her side. He touched her long hair and asked, "How do you feel?" "I feel that my cultivation has reached a bottleneck," Jiayu said with a smile. The bottleneck she spoke of was the realm of near deity, which she could not advance for a long time. "There is no hurry. Rest for a while and get yourself balanced," Futian said. Jiayu nodded, and at this moment she turned her attention toward the woman in white, who was behind Futian. She saw Ling Long standing quietly behind Futian, whose beautiful eyes fell on Jiayu as if to assess her. Seeing this, Jiayu had a strange look on her face, but then she looked at Futian with a smile. Futian also felt a little awkward. This image was accurate. Beautiful. Ling Long, the name I just gave her, is someone I met in the Relic of the Gods. She's a descendant of the great emperor, born out of the supreme will and have merged with my will to a certain degree, so I brought her back here. Futian explained. When Jiayu heard Futian's words, she looked at Ling Long with great interest. She was born out of the great emperor's will. Who is she? Ling Long looked at Jiayu as well and asked Futian. Futian didn't know quite how to answer her. But Jiayu couldn't help but smile and reply. My name is Jiayu, and I am his wife. Wife? Ling Long didn't seem to have a good grasp on this concept. Futian explained. That means we are together. Futian felt a headache coming on. It seemed that he had to do some brainwashing on Ling Long. Don't resist, Futian said. Then the divine light dazzled upon his body, as strands of golden divine light surrounded Ling Long's body and entered through her brow chakra. Suddenly, countless information began to pour into Ling Long's mind, so Ling Long closed her eyes and began receiving them. Quietly. After a long while, Futian stopped and saw that Ling Long's eyes were still closed. He took Jiayu's hand and led her towards the sleeping quarters. As soon as the door to the backyard was opened, Futian felt something behind him. He turned around and saw Ling Long was following behind him. Futian looked at her and blinked, asking her, What are you doing here? I'm following you. I'll be wherever you'll be. Ling Long repeated what Futian said earlier. Futian rubbed between his brows and said, Just go sit there and digest the memories I gave you earlier, and don't disturb me without my order. There was some puzzlement in Ling Long's eyes. Why did he change what he said? But still, she obeyed Futian's command and sat down quietly, acting obediently. Next to him, Jiayu watched all this with a brilliant smile. The woman that Futian brought back was behaving much like a child. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. Imperial Palace was extremely quiet, and everyone was busy cultivating to improve their strengths. Futian had been guarding Ling Long ever since he brought her back. After all, Ling Long's strength was too powerful. If there were an accident, her destructive power would be equally terrifying. Over the past few days, he had been transmitting all kinds of memories to Ling Long and helping her to acclimate to this world. He had passed the situation of the entire cultivation world into her memory, and Ling Long was digesting them quickly. Her mind had been opened, and she was now an actual, living being in all sense of the words. Her cultivation was powerful, and her ability to lean was astounding. She was getting to know the world at an extremely rapid speed. In addition, Futian would also practice sparring with Ling Long. At this time, in the cultivation court located at the very top of the Imperial Palace, a terrifying divine matrix lit up. There were terrifying and violent sounds that could be made out vaguely. Even a monstrous fighting will pressed down and broke through the defense of the divine matrix, shrouding the entire Imperial Palace. What was more astonishing to those around it was that this will neither belong to Futian nor Huajiayu. Then, it could only be from the woman in white who was brought back by Futian. Was she fighting the palace lord? Was it a real fight or just a sparring session? In the cultivation court, the dull and muffled banging sounds rang out continuously, like thunderous explosions. Huajiayu stood on one side as her beautiful eyes looked at the two figures in front of her. Futian and Ling Long were in a head-to-head confrontation, and neither evaded the other in the slightest. They directly attacked each other, and their exchanges were extreme. Futian was overwhelmed and submerged by a supremely horrific fighting will. He felt as if he was facing a god from heaven who was invincible. The oppression of his spiritual will was incredibly frightening. Bang! With a loud boom, Futian was knocked out into flying. After he landed, he slid backward and only managed to stop himself after a few moments. He stared straight ahead and let out a long breath. He said with a smile, "Awesome! They haven't used my full power yet," Ling Long said as she looked at Futian without even a little bit of courtesy. Futian was taken aback by surprise and said to her, "Did no one tell you the virtue of humility during your studies these days?" Ling Long nodded and replied, "But for you, it was not necessary." "That's harsh," Futian said. "Shall we continue?" Ling Long said lightly, her eyes falling on Futian. "Rest," Futian said, then stepped forward as he came to Ling Long's side. "You must have already digested everything that was passed on to you and learned from it. You must understand the world a little better now." Ling Long nodded. "Next, I want to tell you where you come from and why you are following me," Futian said. Hearing his words, Ling Long had a strange look on her face as she said, "You can choose not to tell me." After learning quite a bit on her own, she guessed that she might have been under the control of Futian, hence her being here. Therefore, she didn't feel the pressing need to know the truth. "No, you have already developed your unique personality, and you have the right to know everything," Futian said. "Don't resist." As he spoke, the light between his brow chakra began to shine, and suddenly images of many memories converged and entered between Ling Long's eyebrows. These were precisely the memories of what he had gone through in the forbidden zone of the gods, except for some of the things that happened between him and Dong Wang Diyuan. Everything about Ling Long was in those memories. Ling Long closed her eyes, and it didn't take long for her to open her eyes again, her beautiful eyes fastened on Futian. "Did you see everything?" Futian asked. Ling Long nodded. "I didn't have any choice before, or else you might have killed me in the Forbidden Zone. In any case, it is indeed my will that was integrated into the will of the great Emperor so that you have a part of my will, and you were affected by me. But now that you have an independent self-awareness, I will not hide it from you," Futian said. "Now you will have to choose your path and give yourself a name." Ling Long looked at Futian, then looked up at the divine matrix in the void, and said, "If what I want to do is not in line with your will you use the divine matrix to get rid of me? If had that kind of thoughts, I wouldn't have allowed you to lear any of this. I brought you here to prevent you from being out of control. After all, your strength is far too strong, and the threat is too great. Even now, if you want to do something to me here, I will have no choice but to activate the divine matrix to deal with you," Futian continued. "But you can leave. And whatever you want to do in the future is your choice." Hypocrite, Ling Long said as she stared at Yi Futian. Huh! Yi Futian was stunned. Who was she calling a hypocrite? He thought he was being honest. At first, he did want to control Ling Long, but then he discovered that Ling Long was not a puppet but a real individual. She would lean by herself, and sooner or later, she would understand everything. You know my being contains part of your will, which means that I, standing here now, have part of your personality. And yet you pretended to ask me to leave. What is that if not hypocrisy? Ling Long looked at Yi Futian and questioned him pointedly. Yi Futian was stupefied for a moment. He looked at the woman and thought her learning ability was just a little too astounding. Ling Long looked at Yi Futian calmly and continued. Ling Long sounds like a good name. I think I'll use it for now. 1. Ling Long also has the meaning of being delicate and well-formed. Ling Long decided to stay. Just as she said, she had retained part of Yi Futian's personality, and this connection was not something that could be separated. After familiarizing herself with the world of cultivation, Yi Futian began introducing divine methods into her cultivation. Previously, whenever Ling Long attacked, she was limited to using only the will itself. After cultivating the divine methods, she could only be stronger than ever before. Many times, Hua Jie would accompany Ling Long in cultivating together so that Yi Futian had some time to take care of his own cultivation and training. Yi Futian didn't expect to return so soon this time, so he concentrated on his cultivation. He and Hua Jie had both encountered a bottleneck, and could not overcome it. However, Yi Futian did not waste time. If he couldn't make any breakthrough in the realm, he would focus on comprehending divine methods and practice sparring with Ling Long. He was constantly improving in strength. Before anyone knew it, several years had passed. In the past few years, many people in Yi Imperial Palace managed to break through their realm of cultivation and advance one step further. The same was true of the outside world. This continent of relics seemed to bring something brand new every day, and changes were happening all the time. After a few years, who knew how many cultivators had appeared in this place? At the same time, some subtle changes had been gradually taking place on this continent of the gods. Over the years, cultivators everywhere had been stationed in the ruins occupied by the Imperial Palace and began settling down on this continent of ruins. However, as this continent of gods was a new world, people from each world began to covet the areas already occupied by the other worlds as more ruins were being excavated. There were endless battles of pillaging that started to occur regularly. Moreover, this kind of battle was originally small-scale battles scattered among various forces. But with time, there had been collisions between the forces from different realms. After all, before this continent of ruins appeared, there had already been a large-scale war in the Divine Prefecture. Opposing attitudes had, in fact, already been established. But the appearance of the relics of the gods attracted the attention of all the worlds, and everyone focused on exploring the gods' relics and the excavation of the ruins instead. However, more than a decade had passed, and most of the ruins had been occupied by top principalities. The entire continent of the ruins had morphed from a state of chaos to a state of relative peace. But now, another kind of chaos was beginning to emerge again. On this day, Yi Futian did not cultivate. He came to the territory occupied by the Devil World. He traveled through the void and looked at the demonic halls built below. The architectural style of their severity and color were similar to those in the capital of the Devil World. Even the sky in this region was obscured, as the demonic will had colored the sky. This vast and endless area had become another Devil World. Some demonic cultivators seemed to sense something as they raised their heads to look in Yi Futian's direction. Some even released their demonic thoughts to scan the area, but they were all repelled by Yi Futian's aura. Some people recognized him and wondered what Yi Futian was doing here. Yi Futian walked forward and came to the former city of the Karura ruins. The place had changed a lot now. It was completely different from before. The former city of the Karura ruins had turned into a demonic city. Even the shrine of the Karura in the distance had turned into a majestic demonic palace, towering into the sky. The pitch-black demonic clouds tossed and turned above the firmament, as if being nurtured by the terrifying light of tribulation, utterly frightening. An even stronger demonic thought swept over him, but once it detected that it was Futian, no one stopped him. After all, no one didn't know the relationship between Futian and Yuxing. The cultivators of the devil world had no likes or dislikes to speak of regarding this first man of the original realm. But the cultivators of the devil imperial palace were polarized on Futian. Some people approved of him and Yuxing, but then some thought that as Futian was not a demonic cultivator, Yuxing was getting too close to him for comfort. They were worried that Yuxing might even be willing to sacrifice the interests of the devil world for Futian's sake. That nature-defying divine ruler was taken away by Futian, for instance. Although it was taken by Futian, in their opinion, it should have belonged to the devil world all the same. Futian saw a familiar face at this time, the guardian of the devil world, Blood Raiment. When she saw Futian, Blood Raiment immediately zoomed in on him. "I'm looking for Yuxing," Futian said with a smile. "Wait a minute." Blood Raiment glanced at Futian, then walked in the direction of the demonic hall. After a while, Futian felt a demonic thought directing his movement. With a sudden flicker of his figure, he appeared instantly in front of a demonic hall. Futian looked at Yuxing, assessing the aura exuded from him, and said, "Still no breakthrough like me?" "Almost," Yuxing said, "but I encountered a bottleneck." Futian nodded. "It is quite a hurdle to step into the near-deity realm. And certainly it is not easy. Here are some elixirs, take them." In Futian's current state, the elixirs he produced were even more excellent, and their grade had surpassed any ordinary elixirs in the second tribulation realm. They were somewhere between the second divine tribulation and near-deity realm, with even purer quality. He gave them to Yuxing, hoping that it would benefit Yuxing's cultivation. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. Naturally, Yuxing would not feign politeness with Futian, so he reached out and took them. He knew how just outstanding these elixirs refined by Futian were, and that they would help him greatly in his cultivation. "I didn't think that 100 years would have gone by so quickly. The dreams that had when we were boys are getting closer now, and the truth is only a step away from being fully revealed, so why hasn't he appeared yet?" Futian raised his head to look into the distance and said, "Why did he choose to take us into hiding in the lower worlds and cultivate there? He was the younger brother of the Devil Emperor by blood. Who am I? Most of the world would just treat him as the son of Emperor Yi Qing. Except, was it really as everyone else thought? Then there was also the excellence of the spirit to consider. Everything gave him a feeling that his adoptive father, and some other people behind the scenes were setting something up, using him as the center of it all. It will not be much longer now," Yuxing said. They had cultivated to this point, they could already see the great emperorship from where they were. Then, the truth must not be too far away either. As for he who had been hidden for so long, he must be getting closer to reveal himself. Futian nodded slightly. What was waiting for them down the road? The two of them stood together without speaking. Only time would tell where these two would end up in the future. At this time, Futian frowned. A voice appeared in his mind. The little condor was sending him a message. Yuxing turned to look at Futian, apparently realizing a change had taken place within him. Something happened over there. There was a conflict between the cultivators of the dark world, Fang Xiyuan, and the others, Futian said. I need to go back. After that, Futian's figure disappeared from where he was. He was using Buddha's celerity to make his way back as quickly as possible. Obviously, the matter at hand was more urgent. Seeing this, Yusheng's eyes sharpened, then he took a great step outside. In the dark world, Yi Qingyao, the Reaper, held a very lofty position. Yuxing knew very well the relationship between Futian and Yi Qingyao. So now, why was there a conflict between the dark world and the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace? Prior to this, in the land of the Divine Prefecture, the dark world, the devil world, and the empty divine realm had fought with Futian. Although Yuxing was not present at the time, he had heard of it. At this time, somewhere else in the god's relic, many cultivators appeared in this area, and a mighty group of cultivators gathered around the outer periphery, looking at a specific place. There, an amazing aura of the Great Path had erupted, and a horrific battle took place there not too long ago. Furthermore, the battle had a very tragic outcome. A very important person had fallen there. Fang Xiyuan, Duo Yu, and Tai Tu stood together, with Little Condor and the others. They were all staring in the opposite direction. Over there, the cultivators from the Dark World, with the terrifying aura of the Great Path surrounding this entire region, had locked down this area. Both Fang Xiyuan and Duo Yu held imperial arms, which puffed out terrifying divine light. On the side where the cultivators from the Dark Court were, there was a corpse lying on the ground. The body was pierced through and through. Several others had fallen, and were lying next to that body. All of them had been slain by Fang Xiyuan and Duo Yu's imperial arms. In front of the corpse in the middle, there were several cultivators from the Dark Court who were standing there, looking down at the corpse. They looked extremely unhappy. The person who died was an important figure in the Dark Court, a direct disciple of the Dark Sovereign, who Fang Xiyuan and Duo Yu killed. Hence, the dire situation at hand. This space seemed particularly oppressive. The Dark Court and many of the cultivators from the Dark World had Fang Xiyuan and his group surrounded. Among them, there were some powerful beings. Infernal King, one of the 7 kings of darkness from the Dark Court, was also present. He was a peak existence of the second tribulation plane, and his cultivation was undeniably strong. There were also other peak figures on his side, but these cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace were tough to deal with. Their strengths were considerable, otherwise they would have been taken down already. What happened? At this time, a voice came from the void in the midst of a terrible atmosphere. It was another person from the Dark World, a giant figure in the Dark World no less, the clan leader of the Infernal Divine Clan. He had already survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path many years ago. After the ruins opened up, he came to this side of the world and cultivated in the ruins with the rest of the Dark Court. Now he had stepped into the realm of near deity. Senior brother, the Infernal King called out. The Infernal King of the Dark Court came from the Infernal Divine Clan, and he was the younger brother of a pillar in the Dark World, the clan leader of the Infernal Divine Clan. The Infernal Divine Clan was said to originate from the Infernal Sovereign. The Infernal Divine Clan leader looked down and knew what had happened immediately. Those pitch-black eyes of his glanced at the cultivators of the Ziwei Imperial Palace, and a horrific aura erupted in an instant. The entire space turned into a world of pure inferno as a destructive storm raged between heaven and earth. And the sky above the clan leader of the Infernal Divine Clan, a dark infernal storm appeared. From the void downward, endless destructive light of catastrophe bloomed from this infernal storm, which shrouded all the cultivators of the Ziwei Imperial Palace. Fang Xiyuan's golden eyes swept up higher into the sky, and they were cold as ice. His body was suspended in midair, as he held the imperial arms, the golden halberd, in his hand. Frightening light was coming out of the imperial arms as divine glory erupted from him. The light of catastrophe in the storm was unable to get any close to him, and was destroyed in the end. Humph! A cold snort was heard. The fight of cultivators in the near-deity realm was horrific. The vast space dimmed as darkness descended. The divine light of destruction enveloped the boundless space as if it had turned into a world of an inferno. The dark infernal spear emerged from that dark storm and carried the power of utmost destruction. It sliced through the void, instantly slammed into Fang Xiyuan's imperial arm. With a loud boom, the surrounding space seemed on the verge of destruction as infinite light of catastrophe appeared. Bang! The imperial arms in Fang Xiyuan's hand nearly got blown away. His body was blasted directly into the ground as his body sank deep into the earth. The ground beneath his feet was raised, and the light surrounding his body was being pulverized like mad. Even with the imperial arms, it was impossible to contend against true existence in the near-deity realm. With a muffled groan, Blood spurted out of Fang Xiyuan's mouth just as he was about to be killed on the spot. However, a massive divine bird appeared at this moment, spreading both its wings and entering into the storm, blocking the destruction that fell from the void. It was none other than the Karura divine bird. Divine body of the demon monarch! Everyone stared over there with a look of surprise, and they saw that it was being controlled by the black condor. Greed flashed through the eyes of the cultivators from the dark court. They thought that these cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace were indeed full of treasures. However, they figured that these people were probably at the core of Ziwei Imperial Palace. The treasures at the dark court, on the other hand, were not plentiful enough that everyone could have gotten some. "You guys get back," the Infernal Divine Clan leader said to the cultivators from the dark world. Suddenly, everyone retreated as they were told. An even more terrifying storm was gathering and turning into a domain of inferno. In this domain, there was only destruction. "You asked for it." The Infernal Divine Clan leader surveyed the cultivators of the Ziwei Imperial Palace in the area below. A terrifying phantom appeared above the sky, like the master who ruled the inferno. The infernal spear in his hand came down with a mighty force, and suddenly, a storm of destruction in the surrounding region pierced the void. In that destructive storm, infernal spears came out from everywhere, as if everything was about to be destroyed under this attack. Buzz! The will of the little condor took control over the Karura's divine body and spread its wings, covering this expanse of the space and protecting everyone below. In an instant, horrific attacks fell in a frenzy. Every one of them slammed into the gigantic body of the Karura. Below, the little condor spat out a mouthful of blood as his will were being impacted severely. There were even some faint signs of disintegration. "Little condor!" Fang Xiyuan and the others had a look of disbelief on their faces as they looked at the little condor, and told him, "Get out of the way." "It's all right, I can hold it." Blood continued oozing from the corners of little condor's mouth, but he replied rather stubbornly. Fang Xiyuan and the others were disciples of the boss, which meant that they were his subordinates. As their elder, how could he not protect them from harm? How was he going to explain that to the boss? The clan leader of the Infernal Divine Clan surveyed the ground below. His eyes couldn't be more cold or indifferent. A murderous intent was blazing within him. Behind him, there were many cultivators from the Infernal Divine Clan. A young man among them looked down coldly. Once upon a time, he had slaughtered heedlessly in the land of the Nine Realms, and Yi Futian had threatened him. "Kill!" the clan leader of the Infernal Divine Clan commanded. Still, almost simultaneously, a terrifying divine light suddenly came towards this direction from a distance, with extreme brilliance. A mighty and superior will shrouded the space, which significantly threatened the cultivators from the dark world. It's Sword Chi! If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. Everyone who felt that terrifying aura trembled immensely in their hearts. In the next moment, the divine sword descended from the sky and slammed directly into the infernal space. The violent booming sounds were constant. The impacts inflicted cracks upon the space, which then shattered and pulverized. The divine sword of destruction now aimed to kill the clan leader of the Infernal Divine Clan. A terrifying dark spear appeared in his hand as he lanced it out straight away. It collided with the divine sword. Suddenly, that shocking sword will dissipate it into nothingness, but an even more terrifying aura swooped down from the air on its heel. Far into the distance, an unparalleled sword light arrived instantly with bad intention. It seemed a top cultivator had turned into a sword. It turned out to be the Supreme Sword Lord. He traveled by turning into a sword. As he unleashed the divine sword in his hand, instantly Taishang swordsmanship erupted. The divine light illuminated from it was blinding. The infernal spear, as wielded by the clan leader of Infernal Divine Clan, stabbed out and collided with the divine sword. Suddenly, the sword will and the destructive spear flowed wildly in this space. Everything around them seemed on the verge of total collapse. "Get back!" Many cultivators retreated frantically. Other cultivators were penetrated by the raging storm and were killed instantly. Bang! The attack repelled the clan leader of the infernal divine clan. The infernal spear in his hand was exuding an astonishing aura, as it turned out to be an imperial arm as well. As the clan leader of the infernal divine clan, aren't you ashamed of bullying your juniors? The supreme sword lord's clothing fluttered in the wind with force, and his eyes swept towards the other like sharp swords. The two were giants in the divine prefecture and the dark world, but Supreme Sword Lord was already a near deity, and had long been a cultivator ranked on the demigod list. The clan leader of the infernal divine clan had break through his realm while he was in this ruins, so the realm of the Supreme Sword Lord was deeper and higher. Behind Supreme Sword Lord, the cultivators from Yi Imperial Palace had rushed here one after the other. Once they learned that Fang Xiyuan and the others were in trouble, many cultivators in Yi Imperial Palace came to give them support as they descended successively. Divine body of the Karura disappeared, and the little condor was left looking a little tired. He stared at the cultivators from the dark world and said coldly, "Today, I will get rid of the trash." "What's happening?" Old Ma asked Fang Xiyuan and the others when he came around. They all knew about the relationship between Yi Futian and Yi Qingyao. Now was not a good time for Yi Imperial Palace to make enemies, which meant they should not have a conflict like this with the Dark World. "They wanted to rob our Imperial arms and attacked us. Duo Yu and I killed a few people in the process," Fang Xiyuan replied, which caused Old Ma to frown. The cultivators from the Dark World were the ones to initiate the attack, and it was no less than to capture the Imperial arms from them. The nature of this attack was malicious, and the equivalent of declaring war on Ziwei Imperial Palace. Fang Xiyuan's reaction was entirely expected, and it was not surprising that he killed those instigators. "Do you know who was the person you killed?" the Infernal King said coldly. Then he glanced at Supreme Sword Lord and the others, pointing to Fang Xiyuan and the others, saying, "These people must die." In the distance, terrifying auras continued to drift towards them, and the cultivators from the Dark Court had also arrived in the area. Surprisingly, even Hua Yunting, the Dark Saint, was among them. "Saint!" Many people bowed and saluted him. Hua Yunting's position in the Dark Court was very prestigious, ranking above the Seven Kings, and equivalent to the demon sage of the Devil Imperial Palace. Hua Yunting glanced below to look at the corpse on the ground, and he did not look pleased. He had heard the conversation between them just now. He recognized that Ziwei Imperial Palace was no ordinary principality. Even as an Imperial-level force, the Dark World was not afraid of Ziwei Imperial Palace. However, there was no need to make enemies out of them either, especially not when Yi Futian and the Divine Prefecture were sort of on opposite sides, and they could use Ziwei Imperial Palace as their allies. Yi Futian's talent was outstanding, and he had the best chance to prove his way to the Imperial realm. In the future, it might even be possible for him to pose a threat to Dongwang the Great, so there was no need to make a break with him. More importantly, Yi Qingyao and Yi Futian enjoyed an excellent relationship. So, in his opinion, Yi Futian could embark on the road of emperorship, and there was no need to hinder him. But now, such a violent conflict had occurred. Glancing at the corpse, he thought that this matter would not end well. At this time, a figure suddenly appeared in this space without anyone being aware of it, as he just appeared out of the ether. Yi Futian. Many people's eyes sharpened instantly, as they focused on the white-haired young man who appeared. It seemed that he already knew what happened here, and he arrived here with all due speed using Buddha's celerity. Yi Futian sensed everything that had happened here from the little condor. The cultivators from the Dark Court took action against Fang Xiyuan and the others, intending to rob them of the Imperial arms, which was why Fang Xiyuan raised his hand against the offenders. Although it was a little impulsive of him, the other party was responsible for instigating the attack, therefore, they were in the right to defend themselves by striking back. "Yi Futian," the Dark Sage said to him, "what do you want to do about it? This matter was getting to be a little thorny. Since you have chosen to take action, strength will determine the outcome. What else can be done?" Futian swept his eyes over the group headed by the clan leader of the Infernal Divine Clan and said, "Are you the one who took action?" As he was speaking, he glanced at the cultivators from the Infernal Divine Clan. When he saw that young man, he remembered some of the things that happened in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Back then, the Infernal Divine Clan had wreaked havoc in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, but because of his background, Futian was unable to do anything about the young man. Futian once promised that he would kill the other man if given the chance, but because of the subsequent changes in the world, he never got around to do it. Now, unexpectedly, the Infernal Divine Clan had once again provoked him. Infernal Divine Clan leader was an incredible figure and a giant of the Dark World. Even Infernal King of the Dark Court was his junior. He was now at the near-deity plane and had obtained a dark divine arm. His abilities were powerful. Yet Futian, a junior, dared to talk to him in such a manner. Although he knew that Futian was very powerful, for the latter to act so presumptuously before him, wasn't he being overconfident? "Sword Lord, I will leave this to you," Futian said to Supreme Sword Lord. "All right," replied the latter as he nodded his head. He admired Futian's attitude. If they did not show their might, others would take them to be pushovers. No matter which force it was, if they had made a move to snatch another person's imperial arm, it was considered a declaration of war. What more needed to be said to those who attempted to kill someone and steal their imperial arm? There was naturally nothing that needed to be discussed. They would speak with their fists. Futian extended his hand, and the divine ruler immediately appeared. His entire body shone with brilliant divine light. He was a sight to behold. Buzz! Sword will burst forth from the figure of Supreme Sword Lord and envelop the region below. The cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace were enveloped inside his sword will. The cultivators in the distance also wisely retreated. They would be in grave danger if they were near a battle of this level. Dark Saint Huayunting frowned. Matters seemed to have escalated out of control and had become very bad. If the Dark Court began fighting with Futian, it was clearly a lose-lose situation. Neither side would benefit from this. However, Futian was fully prepared to attack. The situation was already beyond their control. In the heavens above, increasingly terrifying destructive will burst forth. The world seemed to become purgatory. In this space, flowing dark currents contained frightening destructive will. They were capable of killing anyone who touched them. Countless dark currents circled around the body of Infernal Divine Clan leader. This caused the region where he stood to turn hideous and terrifying. The currents were like countless tentacles. They then immediately grabbed out at Futian down below. Behind Futian, there suddenly appeared a dazzling yin-yang diagram. This diagram instantly expanded. Emerald green divine light circulated within it. The diagram released the terrifying power of yin and yang that shone on the dark currents. In an instant, the constant currents sweeping towards Futian were reduced to dust. Tumble. A dull thud could be heard. Destructive dark spears traversed across the sky and charged towards Futian. They plummeted straight towards their target like countless beams of destructive light. It was as though doomsday had befallen this region. Futian extended his arm, and an enormous wheel of space appeared. It radiated unparalleled divine halos and engulfed all the incoming spears. Infernal Divine Clan leader revealed an astonished look when he saw this. The wheel of space, which could swallow everything, was gigantic. It was akin to a black hole, sucking his attacks into another space and causing them to dissipate without a trace. Buzz! Suddenly, Infernal Divine Clan leader detected a strong sense of danger. He thrust his spear downwards, and it collided with the Divine Ruler that was charging towards him. The Divine Ruler was as sharp as a sword. T's terrifying power sent the clan leader flying upwards uncontrollably. Sword will overwhelmed the space and flooded his body. The clan leader snorted. His body emanated dark divine light to negate the power of the sword will. However, now, Futian's body disappeared from his sight. "This is bad!" The facial expression of the clan leader changed drastically as he immediately ordered, "Retreat!" Rumble. There was a dull thud as the domain that enveloped the region was penetrated. Futian's figure immediately pierced through it. Infernal Divine Clan leader looked towards Futian, and his expression was extremely ugly. The next moment, he saw Futian stabbing out at the various cultivators of the Infernal Divine Clan. The cultivators of the Infernal Divine Clan revealed shocked expressions. Futian had broken through the domain of a near-deity cultivator. They released their most powerful auras of the Great Path. Even the youth, who had massacred people in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, had a look of terror in his eyes. This sword directly pierced across the space. Everywhere the sword passed over, figures fell out of the sky. They perished on the spot. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. When the cultivators in the distance saw the cultivators of the Infernal Divine Clan perish one by one, they were astonished. Futian was exterminating the Infernal Divine Clan. The youth was not dead. Futian had spared him, but he was still standing before the youth and staring at him. "Save me!" the youth pleaded as he looked towards Infernal Divine Clan leader. "Futian, you attacked the members of my clan?" said Infernal Divine Clan leader in a voice as cold as ice. Futian ignored him. He extended his palm and placed it on the other party's head. The youth showed no signs of resistance. "I said that you would pay with your life," said Futian as he stared into the youth's eyes. A terrifying divine fire burst forth from his palm. In an instant, the youth was consumed by the divine flames. They seared through his body and burned his spiritual soul into a crisp. The youth let out agonizing screams. His body was slowly disintegrated by the divine flames and was reduced to nothingness. Everyone was shocked at Futian's methods. He had killed off the young clan leader of the Infernal Divine Clan so brutally. His methods were ruthless and decisive, showing no signs of mercy. Infernal Divine Clan leader's facial expression was extremely ugly. Murderous intent filled the sky as terrifying destructive will encapsulated the vast space, turning it into purgatory. Futian's gaze was serene. He did not seem concerned at all. He turned towards Infernal Divine Clan leader calmly and said, "Did you not consider that I would do this when you attacked my disciple?" Before Futian's arrival, Infernal Divine Clan leader attacked Fang Xian and Duo Yu to kill them. If it weren't because Little Condor protected them with the help of the divine body of Karura, they would most likely have perished. Since the clan leader showed Fang Xian and Duo Yu no mercy, Futian would not hesitate to do the same. Moreover, there were old grudges between Futian and Infernal Divine Clan. He had no reason to spare them. With a strike, Futian directly eradicated all the cultivators from the Infernal Divine Clan. The members of other top forces from the Dark World felt their hearts tremble violently as they witnessed the scene. Futian showed no sign of fear when facing the Dark Court and the Infernal Divine Clan, one of the Dark World's top forces. He had no scruples about massacring the members of the Infernal Divine Clan. This caused the crowd to be fearful of him. They had to consider the consequences carefully before they decided to attack Futian. If they couldn't kill him on the spot, he would certainly take his revenge on them in the future. Futian pointed the divine ruler at Infernal Divine Clan leader. A few years ago, Futian was targeted by Shenyan Buddha Lord when he was about to leave the Imperial Palace. He then slaughtered the latter in their fight. Now, he had no reason to fear Infernal Divine Clan leader. The latter wielded an imperial arm, but so had Shenyan Buddha Lord back then. He wielded a Buddhist divine sword, yet he still perished. Right at this moment, the sky in the distance dimmed. An even more menacing aura permeated the space. Many people looked in that direction. Their hearts palpitated frenziedly. The cultivators, who stood at the peak of the Dark Court, had arrived. Dark Saint's heart also throbbed as he looked in the direction where the aura came from. He had an uneasy feeling. He vaguely sensed something. The incoming person was crowned the next divine saint before Yi Qingyao had joined the Dark Court. At the same time, in a different location, Yu Xing also reached this place. There was also a peerless beauty dressed in white. It was unknown when she had also arrived in this region. Futian sized up the people who had arrived. The leading cultivator had an unfathomable aura on him. He stood there, his vibe similar to that of the Dark Lord. An ethereal aura emanated from his figure, giving off a very powerful, threatening will. Futian had never met this person before. The other party had not participated in the battle in the old Heaven Court. Back when the Devil World was at war with the Divine Prefecture, the Dark World had merely assisted. They did not send their strongest members. Yi Qingyao later joined the battlefield, but this person had not appeared before. Although Yi Futian had never met him before, he could guess the status of this person in the Dark Court just by looking at his imposing manner as well as the large group of cultivators behind him. Yi Futian had come in contact with the top cultivators from the various worlds. Ji Wudao had great Skylords Black and White Almighty as guardians. Dong Wang Diyuan was also accompanied by top-tier cultivators. The Empty Divine Realm had Dugu Wuxia, and the Devil World had Yan Gi, and so on. Before this, he had encountered Dark Saint Hua Yunting from the Dark Court. However, Hua Yunting was not their strongest figure. He was still far lacking. Rumor has it that the most powerful figure aside from the Dark Lord in the Dark Court was Lord Shaman. He was the great shaman and the leader of the three Dark Sages. Legend has it that Lord Shaman was the second disciple of the Dark Lord. He had been a disciple of the Dark Lord for a very long time. Back then, the head disciple was similarly outstanding with extraordinary talent. He was peerless, and his status in the Dark Court was exceptional. His personality was kind and compassionate. He guided his younger brothers in their cultivation. However, it was precisely this that cost him his life. In the Dark World, kindness was taboo. It went against the path of darkness. In the end, this head disciple was killed by his younger brother, Lord Shaman. The latter took everything he owned and inherited his position. The Dark Lord had silently acknowledged all that had transpired. Since then, Lord Shaman became the heir of the Dark Court and the leader of the three Dark Sages. The disciples after him neither dared to contend with him nor attack him. Someone had tried to do so before, and the consequences were tragic. Currently, Lord Shaman was already a giant-level figure. He was the mightiest person in the Dark Court aside from the Dark Lord. Even Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint posed no threat to his position. This was the status quo until Yi Qingyao appeared in the Dark World. She was known as the Dark Maiden and was later given the title, the Reaper. The Dark Lord treated her as though she was one of his own disciples. He even forbade everyone in the Dark Court from harming her. Because of this, Yi Qingyao managed to survive in the Dark World and could keep on growing. If she did not have the special protection of the Dark Lord, she wouldn't have been able to survive at all. "Lord Shaman!" greeted the cultivators of the Dark Court. When they saw Lord Shaman arriving, they all frantically bowed to him and acted very polite. They were very respectful towards him as they all feared him. Even his younger brothers felt the same. Lord Shaman was extremely ruthless in his ways. Back then, even his elder brother, who had taken extra good care of him and trained him, had been killed by him. One could imagine what sort of cultivator he was. The world did not doubt that he would even kill the Dark Lord and take his place if he was powerful enough. The Dark Lord himself was well aware of this fact. Regardless, this was originally the law of survival in the Dark World that he had established. "Lord Shaman," greeted Infernal Divine Clan leader. Then, even an extraordinary cultivator like Infernal Divine Clan leader was bowing towards Lord Shaman. The Dark World was different from the Divine Prefecture. The Dark Court's authority was absolute. For the Dark World forces, they usually did not need to worry about the Dark Court on a day-to-day basis. However, no one dared to disobey orders when the latter sent down orders. No one could bear the consequences of doing so. Hence, the cultivators of the various forces of the Dark World had profound respect towards the Dark Court. Lord Shaman was accustomed to receiving such reverence from the crowd. He swept a glance at the corpse, and it slowly floated upwards. "Bring younger brother's body back to the Dark Court and bury him in the graveyard of the Divine Mountain," Lord Shaman commanded. "Yes, sir," responded one of the cultivators who stood behind him as he stepped forward to retrieve the body. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. EU thanks. Lord Shaman fixed his gaze on one of the cultivators from the Dark Court. His eyes glistened with terrifying crimson light. His presence was undoubtedly scary. "Lord Shaman!" the cultivator cried out. He was a Renhuang, but he revealed a look of intense fear when his eyes met with Lord Shaman's. "You followed younger brother. He has perished in battle, yet you are unscathed. Why are you still alive?" As soon as Lord Shaman said this, his menacing crimson gaze penetrated space and pierced the eyes of the Renhuang. The Renhuang let out a blood-curdling shriek as blood oozed out from his eyes. 2 beams of crimson light shot into his pupils and punctured his brain. It was a frightening scene to behold. "Arg!" The Renhuang covered his eyes with his hands. Blood tainted his fingers red. He looked miserable. His body was shaking uncontrollably, as though he was experiencing the cruelest torture in the world. He felt as though his spiritual soul was being torn apart from his body. He could see many gruesome scenes flashing before his eyes as he was drowned in the crimson eyes of Lord Shaman. His past experiences replayed in his mind. Splat! The crimson light seared 2 holes through the Renhuang's brain. The dreadful torture had finally ended for the cultivator from the Dark Court. He collapsed to the ground, and his blood flushed the ground red. The surrounding space turned exceptionally quiet. Even though the person Lord Shaman killed was just a Renhuang, it still impacted everyone around greatly. The way the Dark Court cultivators handled things was indeed ruthless. Lord Shaman acted so cruelly when punishing his own underlings. One could imagine how much more savage he would be when he faced his opponents. From the looks of it, things were sure to turn ugly today. The first thing this great shaman from the Dark Court did upon arrival was torture a member of his court to death. How would he possibly let the cultivators who killed his younger brother leave here alive? When Dark Saint Huayenting saw this scene, he knew things had taken a turn for the worse. Lord Shaman was putting on a show of force. "Capture everyone who was involved in the murder of younger brother," ordered Lord Shaman in an indifferent tone. He said this with a commanding voice, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Yes, Lord Shaman," responded several cultivators of the Dark Court behind him as they stepped forward. They were all cultivators who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. They had come forward to arrest those involved. He was going to capture all those involved in the death of his younger brother. That included Fang Xiyuan, Duo Yu, and the others. Fang Xiyuan raised the golden halberd in his hand and pointed it at Lord Shaman. The golden halberd unleashed astonishing murderous intent. Fighting will circled his figure. Fang Xiyuan was originally an extremely unruly person. He would not surrender just like that. Duo Yu's gaze was similarly as cold as ice. He raised the long spear in his hands. His eyes became bizarre and frightening. They were the eyes of samsara. "Kill anyone who attacks us without mercy," Futian ordered as he looked at Fang Xiyuan and the others. "Yes, master," replied Fang Xiyuan. Supreme Sword Lord was also beside him. Sword will circled his figure and enveloped the space. His aura was extremely astonishing. When the cultivators of the Dark Court saw this scene, all of them took a few steps forward. A terrifying dark aura was released. It covered the sky, and in an instant, the sky was dyed black, plunging the world into darkness. The sky turned dark. Futian sized up the people who had arrived. The leading cultivator had an unfathomable aura on him. He stood there, his vibe similar to that of the Dark Lord. An ethereal aura emanated from his figure, giving off a very powerful, threatening will. Futian had never met this person before. The other party had not participated in the battle in the Old Heaven Court. Back when the Devil World was at war with the Divine Prefecture, the Dark World had merely assisted. They did not send their strongest members. Yi Qingao later joined the battlefield, but this person had not appeared before. Although Yi Futian had never met him before, he could guess the status of this person in the Dark Court just by looking at his imposing manner as well as the large group of cultivators behind him. Yi Futian had come in contact with the top cultivators from the various worlds. Ji Wudao had great Skylords Black and White Almighty as guardians. Dong Wang Diyuan was also accompanied by top-tier cultivators. The Empty Divine Realm had Duge Wuxia, and the Devil World had Yen Gi, and so on. Before this, he had encountered Dark Saint Hua Yunting from the Dark Court. However, Hua Yunting was not their strongest figure. He was still far lacking. Rumor has it that the most powerful figure aside from the Dark Lord in the Dark Court was Lord Shaman. He was the great shaman and the leader of the 3 Dark Sages. Legend has it that Lord Shaman was the second disciple of the Dark Lord. He had been a disciple of the Dark Lord for a very long time. Back then, the head disciple was similarly outstanding with extraordinary talent. He was peerless, and his status in the Dark Court was exceptional. His personality was kind and compassionate. He guided his younger brothers in their cultivation. However, it was precisely this that cost him his life. In the Dark World, kindness was taboo. It went against the path of darkness. In the end, this head disciple was killed by his younger brother, Lord Shaman. The latter took everything he owned and inherited his position. The Dark Lord had silently acknowledged all that had transpired. Since then, Lord Shaman became the heir of the Dark Court and the leader of the 3 Dark Sages. The disciples after him neither dared to contend with him nor attack him. Someone had tried to do so before, and the consequences were tragic. Currently, Lord Shaman was already a giant-level figure. He was the mightiest person in the Dark Court aside from the Dark Lord. Even Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint posed no threat to his position. This was the status quo until Yi Qingyao appeared in the Dark World. She was known as the Dark Maiden and was later given the title, the Reaper. The Dark Lord treated her as though she was one of his own disciples. He even forbade everyone in the Dark Court from harming her. Because of this, Yi Qingyao managed to survive in the Dark World and could keep on growing. If she did not have the special protection of the Dark Lord, she wouldn't have been able to survive at all. "Lord Shaman!" greeted the cultivators of the Dark Court. When they saw Lord Shaman arriving, they all frantically bowed to him and acted very polite. They were very respectful towards him as they all feared him. Even his younger brothers felt the same. Lord Shaman was extremely ruthless in his ways. Back then, even his elder brother, who had taken extra good care of him and trained him, had been killed by him. One could imagine what sort of cultivator he was. The world did not doubt that he would even kill the Dark Lord and take his place if he was powerful enough. The Dark Lord himself was well aware of this fact. Regardless, this was originally the law of survival in the Dark World that he had established. "Lord Shaman," greeted Infernal Divine Clan leader. Then, even an extraordinary cultivator like Infernal Divine Clan leader was bowing towards Lord Shaman. The Dark World was different from the Divine Prefecture. The Dark Court's authority was absolute. For the Dark World forces, they usually did not need to worry about the Dark Court on a day-to-day basis. However, no one dared to disobey orders when the latter sent down orders. No one could bear the consequences of doing so. Hence, the cultivators of the various forces of the Dark World had profound respect towards the Dark Court. Lord Shaman was accustomed to receiving such reverence from the crowd. He swept a glance at the corpse, and it slowly floated upwards. "Bring younger brother's body back to the Dark Court and bury him in the graveyard of the Divine Mountain," Lord Shaman commanded. "Yes, sir," responded one of the cultivators who stood behind him as he stepped forward to retrieve the body. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. Lord Shaman fixed his gaze on one of the cultivators from the Dark Court. His eyes glistened with terrifying crimson light. His presence was undoubtedly scary. "Lord Shaman!" the cultivator cried out. He was a Renhuang, but he revealed a look of intense fear when his eyes met with Lord Shaman's. You followed younger brother. He has perished in battle, yet you are unscathed. Why are you still alive? As soon as Lord Shaman said this, his menacing crimson gaze penetrated space and pierced the eyes of the Renhuang. The Renhuang let out a blood-curdling shriek as blood oozed out from his eyes. 2 beams of crimson light shot into his pupils and punctured his brain. It was a frightening scene to behold. Arg! The Renhuang covered his eyes with his hands. Blood tainted his fingers red. He looked miserable. His body was shaking uncontrollably, as though he was experiencing the cruelest torture in the world. He felt as though his spiritual soul was being torn apart from his body. He could see many gruesome scenes flashing before his eyes as he was drowned in the crimson eyes of Lord Shaman. His past experiences replayed in his mind. Splat! The crimson light seared 2 holes through the Renhuang's brain. The dreadful torture had finally ended for the cultivator from the Dark Court. He collapsed to the ground, and his blood flushed the ground red. The surrounding space turned exceptionally quiet. Even though the person Lord Shaman killed was just a Renhuang, it still impacted everyone around greatly. The way the Dark Court cultivators handled things was indeed ruthless. Lord Shaman acted so cruelly when punishing his own underlings. One could imagine how much more savage he would be when he faced his opponents. From the looks of it, things were sure to turn ugly today. The first thing this great shaman from the Dark Court did upon arrival was torture a member of his court to death. How would he possibly let the cultivators who killed his younger brother leave here alive? When Dark Saint Huayunting saw this scene, he knew things had taken a turn for the worse. Lord Shaman was putting on a show of force. Capture everyone who was involved in the murder of younger brother, ordered Lord Shaman in an indifferent tone. He said this with a commanding voice, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Yes, Lord Shaman, responded several cultivators of the Dark Court behind him as they stepped forward. They were all cultivators who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. They had come forward to arrest those involved. He was going to capture all those involved in the death of his younger brother. That included Fan Xiyuan, Duo Yu, and the others. Fan Xiyuan raised the golden halberd in his hand and pointed it at Lord Shaman. The golden halberd unleashed astonishing murderous intent. Fighting will circled his figure. Fan Xiyuan was originally an extremely unruly person. He would not surrender just like that. Duo Yu's gaze was similarly as cold as ice. He raised a long spear in his hands. His eyes became bizarre and frightening. They were the eyes of Samsara. Kill anyone who attacks us without mercy, Futian ordered as he looked at Fan Xiyuan and the others. Yes, master, replied Fan Xiyuan. Supreme Sword Lord was also beside him. Sword will circled his figure and enveloped the space. His aura was extremely astonishing. When the cultivators of the Dark Court saw this scene, all of them took a few steps forward. A terrifying dark aura was released. It covered the sky, and in an instant the sky was dyed black, plunging the world into darkness. The sky turned dark. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.